Can we come to order? Councillors, it is 7 o'clock on Tuesday the 22nd of February, so welcome to the full council meeting, and we express a welcome to any members of the public who are present and or watching if possible. Councillors, before I proceed with the agenda, can I just say that there has been an urgent item of additional business which I'm adding to our agenda, and rather than have it right at the end, I'm going to have it effectively at item 9, so that it runs concurrently with another item which fits in better. I'll explain more as we get to that item on the agenda. But effectively it's a report from a committee coming up to us. So please, item number 1 on our agenda are the minutes of the meetings that we held on the 22nd of November and 7th of December. Are you happy for me to sign those as a correct record? Thank you, members. Whilst I do so, could we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm we've had apologies from Councillor Gary Stansfield.
Thank you very much. Item number 3 then is disclosure of interest. Please, if you do have interest to disclose, can you tell me which item it relates to and whether it is a disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary item? I see Councillor Paul Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairman. Two non-pecuniary items on agenda item 15, the second motion about bank closures. Two disclosures. Firstly, I'm a former employee of the Financial Conduct Authority some time ago, but I'm also a member of the money purchase pension scheme there, and obviously I do still know a number of the staff there. I don't think it affects my ability to advise on to vote on that. The second aspect is that I do have bank accounts with a number of banks in Leatherhead that are about to close. Like most people, I don't use them very often at the moment, but again, I've been advised by Democratic Services that that's not something that prevents me from voting on that, but it is a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I say, I suspect there'll be a number of councillors, particularly in the northern part of Mole Valley, who have bank accounts with those banks in Leatherhead. So could I just ask for all those who have bank accounts with banks in the northern area who could be affected by closures to please show? Do we need to individually record that, or do we?
It's got to include Dorking Lloyds, because that's going to close too.
Yes, thank you. It's almost to say, if you don't have a bank account, let me know. But yes, yeah, should we? Could we ask if anybody who doesn't have a bank account with a branch, in a physical branch, these are all the techno people putting their hands up, aren't they? Have we got that? Thank you very much. I think that's the more effective way. Thank you, members. I saw Councillor Elizabeth Daly. Yeah,
just to check, I think I may have a pecuniary interest to do with motion 5/2022 with regards to the Surrey Pension Fund, as I will be receiving a pension from the Surrey Pension Fund within the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Councillor James Friend.
Thank you, Chairman. I declare 2 interests in both of the motions, and for this purpose I will leave the debate for them. I used to be an authorised person in the investment management industry, and therefore I wouldn't seek to give advice one way or the other on any pension fund administration or investment process. And I continue to be, or hope to in the future, a pension receiver from the banking sector, having worked there for many years, so I have a pecuniary interest in the second motion.
Thank you, Councillor. And I saw Councillor Helen Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of the County Council. I refer to, agenda item 15, motion 5/2022. I'm a member of the County Council and as Chairman of the County Council entitled to attend all meetings of the County Council. I'm also a beneficiary of the Surrey Pensions Fund and therefore I will withdraw from this debate on those grounds.
Thank you. That's obviously assuming that the Council wishes to discuss it tonight, but thank you very much. Councillor Tim Ashton.
Yes, I'm in receipt of Surrey County Council pension.
So that's motion 522. Thank you very much. Councillor Bridget Kendrick.
Yes, this is regarding motion 522. I actually have just recently started work in a climate sustainability company with clients such as Rio Tinto, etc., as we help them move into sustainability, but they are part of the ongoing debate.
So is that pecuniary or
It is non-pecuniary. They don't.
Non-pecuniary for that, thank you. Councillor Tim Ashton, we're just checking that was pecuniary, so you'll withdraw for discussion on that item. Thank you very much. Councillor David Preedy, I can see.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, on motion 7, the budget motion, as Chair of Headley Parish Council, we would be eligible for a concurrent services grant, except we receive it in services in kind rather than money. So I just want that on the record, non-pecuniary.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. And I'm sorry, my eyesight's not too good.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Sorry.
I am a consultant in the energy business. I'm a petroleum geologist, and I do have clients who are would be affected by motion 5.
Thank you. So you're saying that's pecuniary?
Yes. And I am also in receipt of a pension.
And a pension
from an oil and gas company.
Thank you. Any other members that I haven't seen? Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for those declarations. So if we get to those motions, obviously the members who have pecuniary items that they've declared, please leave at that point. Item number 5 then is public question time, and as you'll see, members, we do have a question which has been received from Mr. Guy Eason. Up to 15 minutes is allowed for this part of our agenda. So could I invite Mr. Eason please to take the seat there and make himself comfortable. So if I can just say that, members, one question has been received. In terms of the procedure, the question will be put and answered without a discussion, but Mr. Eason would have the right to a supplementary question based on the information that's been given, if he so wishes. So, Mr. Eason, could you kindly read out your question for us? Thank you.
In view of the Council declaring a climate emergency and the sharply increasing cost of heating, can the Council now revise the regulation banning the replacement of inefficient wooden windows with thermally efficient UPVC ones in conservation areas? There is a very good case for this in Church Walk, Leatherhead and other properties in the area. Modern UPVC windows, particularly sash windows with wood effect, are almost indistinguishable from wooden ones. I've noticed this for myself in Church Walk. The great advantage of UPVC windows are that all properties look smart and presentable. Wooden windows require painting at least every 5 years. If one of the households is unable to paint their windows, it can have a negative effect on the whole area. Replacement wooden windows are prohibitively expensive and are usually less thermally efficient, which can result in houses with very old wooden windows which have reached the end of their useful life and are often held together with filler. The present guidelines are unfair and have resulted in a ludicrous state of affairs where, for example, you have a terrace of 6 cottages in Church Walk, Leatherhead, of which there is only one without UPVC windows. I did try to get planning permission last year for UPVC replacement windows for our cottage, but faced with the prospect of refusal, I withdrew our planning application. I am asking the above question on behalf of myself and a number of residents who have a problem with the state of the windows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please ask Councillor Margaret Cooksey to please answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to thank Mr. Eason for his question. It is worth saying, starting with the climate emergency aspect of the question, I fully appreciate that with energy costs increasing, as well as the desire to mitigate climate impact by reducing energy consumption, people are looking for more energy-efficient homes. Information from the Energy Savings Trust suggests that there is no real difference in energy efficiency between well-maintained wooden window frames and UPVC window frames. It must also be kept in mind that the plastic frames are significantly less environmentally friendly than wooden frames in terms of both manufacture and disposal. It therefore appears that from a climate emergency perspective, there is no favour for UPVC over wooden frames. However, we do understand that ownership of a building within a heritage area or a building that is listed does come with responsibilities and restrictions. Often those responsibilities can extend to being restricted as to what you can do, as well as increased maintenance and the need to use more expensive materials. We wish to ensure that residents can meet their climate change responsibilities as well as their responsibilities to the built environment. We want to ensure that residents have access to advice about cost-effective solutions that can meet both objectives. The Council has been working in partnership with Action Surrey for a number of years, providing advice and solutions to reduce energy costs and go low carbon. I will be asking officers to contact them to see if their advice can be extended to buildings with special requirements. The Council has also committed to producing a design code supplementary planning document, and there may be opportunity to include details in respect of heritage material choices. From a planning perspective, the majority of houses do not require planning permission to replace windows or doors, although they do need to be installed by a fencer-approved person in order to ensure compliance with the building regulations. However, in some specific areas, Moor Valley has put in place directions which remove those permitted development rights, and therefore planning permission is required for replacement windows and doors. These Article 4 directions cover various roads in the Brockham, Dorking and Leatherhead conservation areas. The Brockham Article 4 was confirmed in 2006 and the Dorking and Leatherhead ones in 1998. If we receive complaints about potential breaches of planning control, we will investigate them to establish whether there is a breach, whether the breach is immune from action, and whether it is expedient to take action. Thank you, Mr. Eason.
Mr. Eason, do you have a supplementary question you'd like to ask based on that answer? Would you put your microphone on? Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gathering from Margaret Cooks's reply that she's requesting that people with this sort of problem have no alternative but to put rather more expensive windows in than they would otherwise A, be able to afford, or B, be able to would normally have, and in which case would the council be prepared to give grant to cover this cost?
Thank you. Could you respond? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be fair to say, as we're about to debate the budget for the following year, if Mr. Eason cares to stay and listen to the debate, he'll recognise that the funding for such grants at this point in time wouldn't be a possibility. However, it's fair to say that in the answer there was a recognition that if people choose to live in a conservation area, they do have a responsibility, and that responsibility could well cost them a bit more money than if they were in any other housing types outside of a conservation area. Though I am led to believe that the wooden frames are not as prohibitively expensive as people think they are, and the difference isn't as great as it once was. And certainly there's evidence that indicates that you're as likely to save a bit more money on your heating bills with the wooden frames as you would be with UPVC.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Eason. Thank you very much for asking your question. Colleagues, in my keenness to progress the agenda, I jumped over item 4, didn't I? But the message behind that is that we do have a large agenda, so if people can keep as brief as possible. So in that format, jumping back to item 4, I just wanted to thank those members who have come up with their ideas for certificates for me to give out. I'm trying to have quite a burst of activity so that the certificates are given out before we enter the election period. If any members have not kept with the time frame but would like a certificate given to a group in their ward, please contact me or Claire Elphick, and I will get my speedy legs out and about. I'm going to quite a few events over the next 2 weeks, and I hope that the Vice Chairman will also benefit from one of them that I'm going to, because this is the centenary year of the Dorking Rugby Football Club, and I've been invited to one of their lunches. I went on their website. I do think that they have them later in the year as well. So if anybody's monitoring this meeting, because I think it's great that local sporting clubs with a history like that have reached out to us as a council and invited me to this lunch. And I hope that when they reach their centenary date itself, that you, Vice Chairman, would enjoy their hospitality and a good game as well. So I just put that out there because obviously it's in your part of the world as well, isn't it? So I hope that works well for you. One of the most eye-opening events, and I won't take you too much time, was an event which I went to, which Councillor Margaret Cooksey was at, and Councillor, I'm just seeing if she's here tonight, Hazel Watson was at. It was a tree planting at the Ashcombe School to commemorate the hospitality of Dorking during the Second World War. And I thought it was apt tonight, of all nights, to remind people of how our area reached out to young Jewish children to provide homes. And there was a gentleman, Mr. Reich, who went back to the school, who had been the youngest child in his cohort to have been rescued by Ralph Vaughan Williams, who had been on the continent, obviously as a musician, and had spoken to this young boy's family and secured safe passage for him. And the message that came across from Mr. Reich, who's now obviously an older gentleman, was always look ahead. And that was a very positive message to the young children who were present at that date. And I can only echo that. So if we move on, please, to item number 6, which is recommendations of committees. Agenda item 6A is for us to consider the recommendations from the Audit Committee meeting on the 27th of January on the Treasury Management Strategy for 22-23 through to 24-25, before its consideration of the report on the budget and council tax item 7. So the report considered by the committee is appended to the agenda at pages 9 through to 56 for you to have read. And Councillor Lynn Brooks, could I ask you please to introduce this item and to propose the recommendations?
Thank you, Chairman. The Audit Committee recommends Council to, and I shall read out the recommendations. 1, approve the capital prudent indicators for 22-23 to 24-25, contained within Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 to the main report, which would specifically enable the Council to borrow up to £3 million if that proved necessary. 2, approve the minimum revenue provision statement contained within Appendix 2, no changes to the previous year. 3, approve the Treasury Management Strategy 22-23 to 24-25 and the Treasury Prudential Indicators contained within Appendix 3, and approve the 22-23 investment policy contained within the Treasury Management Strategy Appendix 3 and the detailed criteria included in Appendix 4. 5, approve the capital strategy in Appendix 7. And 6, note the work on the asset investment strategy and the management arrangements set out in Appendix 8. That is what is recommended, and if possible, Chairman, I would like to speak at the end of the debate.
Thank you. Yes, of course, you can sum up the debate. Do any members wish to speak to this item? I don't see any. Councillor Brooks, would you like to address us? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the Audit Committee knows, and the Section 151 officer, there was a deep debate about the concerns of taking a significant step that item 1 in this agenda and our recommendations means. It means that the capital is exhausted and we are now considering borrowing, and this was discussed at length. There is a note which explains also the way that the voting went, and also some concerns have been raised past the meeting. However, I have confirmation from the Section 151 officer that the potential code and all the steps and reporting required to take considering debt will be provided to the Audit Committee and the Council over the coming months. This also consideration of exiting our investments for commercial purposes to replace the capital in advance of considering formal debt. I know the Section 151 officer and I have had a discussion, and I hope that Nick will agree that this is within the code and will be adhered to. So I just wish that to be minuted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure that will be minuted. As no other members have indicated they wish to speak, can I see all those in favour of the recommendations to please show? Are there any against? And were there any abstentions? Thank you. So that was carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Brooks, and the Audit Committee for your work on that. Thank you. Item number 7 is therefore the 2022 to 23 budget and the council tax resolution. Members are asked, please, to approve the recommendations as set out on pages 3 and 4 of the agenda regarding the forthcoming year's budget, and following consideration of those recommendations, agree the council tax for 2022 to 23 as set out in the council tax resolutions through on pages 235 through to 238. I understand that Councillor Bridget Kendrick, as the Cabinet Member for Finance, will propose the budget and that the leader is going to second that motion. Members, can I just remind everybody that in doing so, there is a time limit of 15 minutes for such a speech, and then the Leader of the Opposition will also have a 15 minutes time span to respond if he wishes. So could I please ask Councillor Bridget Kendrick to propose the motion? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I can manage 15 minutes, but I'll do my best. In 2020, I presented my first budget, full of hope and positivity, and yet within less than a month, the world had changed with the onset of the COVID pandemic. In 2021, I presented a budget that was about resilience and prudence in the face of an ongoing pandemic. And tonight, I present a budget that looks to steer Mole Valley out of the pandemic and face the realities and ongoing uncertainties that lie ahead of us as we hopefully come to live with COVID. Many of you here tonight, and hopefully some listeners, will have heard me introduce the medium-term financial strategy and this budget over many meetings since November. Throughout the pandemic, the Council was very grateful to receive funding to cover many of the costs of the pandemic from the government. And together with decisive action from this Council to defer spending and make efficiencies, we were able to weather the storm more than many councils. A lot of officer time focused on COVID activities, such as grant management. We can never thank our officers enough for their efforts in this time, but once again, we thank you all. Government funding did not go on forever, as from last summer, support was reduced by 70%, with funding concentrated on homelessness support and COVID communications. Having forecast that the costs of COVID on the Council would be circa 1.5 million, the 2021-22 budget approved the use of reserves of up to 2 million to cover this financial impact. These costs have been made up mainly by the loss of income on car parking, Dorking Hall's rents and Dorking and Leatherhead leisure centres revenue. The cost of COVID has come, we anticipate, to 1.2 million. If we had not taken this approach, we would have had to make cuts that would no doubt have severely impacted services. Indeed, without the use of reserves, we estimate around 4 million worth of savings in one financial year, and I doubt any of us here tonight would have wanted that. However, as detailed and agreed in the medium-term financial strategy, while the Council has prudently used reserves to fund the very significant costs of COVID and to provide time for the ongoing permanent impact of COVID to be better understood, the Council must now return to a position of a balanced budget. That is, a budget where underlying income and expenditure are in balance and there is no budgeted ongoing draw on financial reserves. So what's the impact of a balanced budget? Well, the Council budget is forecast at a net cost of services of 11.664 million. That's 0.785 million greater than the funding available at 10.879 million. Quite frankly, that's not a balanced budget. And that is that reason why we started to review areas to make efficiencies and create additional revenue and enable us to deliver key policies as part of the annual plan. Yes, we would have liked more government funding. A fairer share of business rates would have been something, but despite collecting around 40 million of business rates in 2019, we received 1.6 million. Indeed, by my calculations, that makes Mole Valley the least funded principal authority in England. We are warned that we will receive even less next year as part of the government's levelling up, or is it down agenda. Alas, that's for our MP to resolve. We can only pick up the pieces. The budget has been in development since spring 2021, and the full details of the process were shared with the Standing Budget Panel. It was a fine-tooth comb exercise, looking at potential measures, assessing the impact on service, communities, financial impact and deliverability. The process involved research, scrutiny, detailed budget monitoring and workshops. At all times, our priority was to protect essential services. The papers outlined 28 proposals to balance the budget. Some are perhaps easier to read, the reintroduction of pre-planning service, recovery of court costs, while others will have more of a, shall I say, mixed reaction, but I hope you all appreciate how important it is for us to balance our budget and the difficult decisions that have to be made. It hasn't been easy. Parking, for example, is an area that is always contentious. Charges have not been increased for 3 years, while the cost of providing parking has. This year, we propose increasing the charge by 10 pence, which over the 3 years is below inflation. And most importantly, for over 45% and growing of residents that use Ringo, they will see prices remain the same following a better renegotiated contract. Across the Council, we will implement programmes to create efficiency through direct monetary savings, redeployment of headcount, looking at open roles and allowing for time to recruit. In addition, digital investment will enable workflow efficiencies. One area I think we can all agree falls into a rather we didn't category is small grants. We do still have capital grants, the community lottery, which is forecast to generate 26,000, and we will review the process for awarding these grants. It is also quicker and easier to reinstate, which I would very much like to do at the earliest opportunity. Fees and charges are another area we carefully considered, especially at a time when inflation is heading to highs unknown for many years. Increases are an average of 4%, which against the current inflationary outlook can be considered modest. We are proposing to continue investing in car parks, and we will continue to support our local communities with a community hub in Pitbrook and support for the Mole Valley Employment and Skills Hub. Revenue reserves will not be allowed to fall below 6 million from the just over 8 million base, and we will make regular contributions to return them to the pre-pandemic levels of 9.6 million. We will start the complex and lengthy work of reviewing leisure service contracts, aiming to give the best value to both Dorking and Leatherhead residents, which I believe is very much needed, particularly in Leatherhead. In 2021, we secured vital funding for carbon reduction initiatives. It's really important to be ready to take advantage of funding, especially climate change, as the government has been encouraging competition for all and any funding. As somebody who regularly employs consultants for niche and specialist work, I believe that this is a really important contribution we can make to the council. And overall, spend on consultants is less than previous years. Say, for example, the 920,000 spent on consultants in 2018-19, primarily to support Meadowbank. Council tax will increase £4.95 on Band E, taking it to £193.41. And it is important to make sure that our residents know when the council tax bills arrive on their doorstep that actually the Mole Valley contribution is around 9% of what they will be paying. We will continue the detailed budget monitoring we have undertaken throughout the pandemic and will be proactive if any corrective measures need to be taken. During this process, I would like to thank the work of the Chair and members of the Standing Budget Panel. Whilst they truly did put all the Cabinet through their paces and tested them on how the budget had formulated, they did it as a critical friend, and I agree with all their recommendations, and may even have suggested a few in the discussion myself. I do think it is important to note that we are not the only council sitting in a room like this, hopefully a warmer one, having a debate over a budget that proposes a savings and efficiency agenda. Far from it. It's more of a case of who isn't. On top of this, all of our residents are facing a cost of living crisis, from energy bills, food, the results of the pandemic, global energy trends, and yes, I'll say it, Brexit. It's not a great narrative for a budget, but I believe we have faced up to reality and protected services and continued investment in our beautiful Mole Valley prudently and balanced in our approach. Yes, I wish we had fairer funding from the government in terms of the allocation of the business rates, but we don't have the luxury of wishful thinking here tonight. This is a budget that deals with financial reality, and in summary, Chair, I recommend this budget to Council.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader, would you like to add to that? Thank you. Second it.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will second formally and reserve the right to speak later in the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor James Feng, could I ask you to respond to that motion as the Leader of the Opposition? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I just clarify that I will be able to speak on the amendment when we get to that as well? Because that will be a separate thing, or do I wait?
Yes, because that will be a separate debate on the amendment. Thank you.
Chairman, this year I have the pleasure of addressing Council as both Leader of the Opposition and as Chairman of the Standing Budget Panel, part of the scrutiny and governance arrangements. I'm going to start with the latter. Firstly, I would like to place on record the panel's thanks to Council officers, both within the finance team and beyond, for the openness and effort that went into the budget process. This time around, the scrutiny process was quite different to previous years, starting with an induction session for new panel members, which combined to be a refresher briefing for previous members. This session was well received and should be repeated as it accelerated the process when the panel met with Cabinet members in that notoriously packed first week of January. The panel then met specifically with members of the senior management team to review the impact of the ongoing pandemic pressures in each service area. This served to highlight the high degree of uncertainty within the budget starting position. More of that later. Many of the panel's recommendations flowed from this phase of the work, including the need to be able to provide more detail around the scale of income from specific or groups of fees and charges lines. The panel process was generally a team approach, with the scrutiny aspects segmented against the terms of reference. This helped create a unified report for the Scrutiny Committee and, based on member feedback, helped to ensure that no one was overloaded during the busy New Year period. Thank you to every single panel member. Everyone contributed, and it was hugely appreciated. I would also like to thank Cabinet members for answering the panel's questions on the various cost-saving, income generation, ongoing and one-off investment schemes that they were proposing. In general, Cabinet members were often able to answer the questions, and I recognise that some felt the experience was akin to sitting in the mastermind chair. It did, however, give the panel a clear and united view of the degree of risk associated with each scheme. It is by no means certain that all will deliver the intended benefits. In fact, it is acknowledged that it is unlikely to be the case. And therefore, the process of monthly operational metric and financial impact monitoring for these schemes will be even more critical during the coming year. One of the largest areas of uncertainty as the panel undertook their review was the potential level of ongoing central government support for issues such as homelessness. It was pleasing, although I'm not sure that's the right word, to see that the central government have maintained their support for these crucial challenges in 2022-23. At the Cabinet meeting, I emphasised, though, that every penny of government support still comes from residents and businesses as taxpayers. So we have a duty to deliver value for money in these areas, as well as remembering that it is not the council's money that the council spends, but the money of Mole Valley residents. As we go through the debate this evening, I'm sure that we'll all be highly aware that the cost of living is rising after the pandemic. Fuel uncertainty is a real concern for many residents. We have a public duty to rein in the costs of the council so that as much as possible, residents' money stays in their pockets for them to spend on life's essentials. Even in Mole Valley, there remain many areas of financial need and deprivation. Much of this is addressed by the voluntary sector, including those of us that support food banks during the year. And much comes from the efforts of individual council officers. But perhaps we need to take this debate to ask ourselves whether the council budget is a missed opportunity to help the levelling up across our district. It's hard to find initiatives in these papers that specifically support those in greatest need, isn't it? Mole Valley once had a reputation for innovation, the recycling schemes, car parking pricing, for example. Isn't it about time that innovation was directed at helping bring fairness to our local area? A Conservative administration tonight wouldn't be bringing forward an inflation-busting 10% hike in car parking charges. Instead, we would be using the identified capital investment for our car parks to introduce automatic number plate recognition, allowing residents to buy pay-as-you-go permits that only charge for precisely the time used throughout the year. This would ensure revenue was fairly captured from car park users and raise income in that way. The uncertainty in consumer behavioural response to these budget plans is clear. Uncertainty and unfairness. If our permit approach were to be in place, then the council could consider a sliding charging scale based on the residents' council tax band. That would lessen the impact of these charges to access our town centres for those most in need in our community, starting levelling up locally. Conceivably, many other council fees and charges could adopt a levelling up scale too. Garden waste, membership of leisure centres, even some of the non-statutory development control fees, making it easier for those most in need to improve their well-being and quality of life. Now that would be innovative. Instead, we are faced with voting on a budget tonight with an acknowledged uncertainty as to how the last-minute pricing changes will impact consumer behaviour. The one thing we do know is that those on lowest incomes will be hardest hit by these increases. You'll be pleased to know, Chairman and Councillors, that I'm not going to run through each line of the budget. I'm sure that others will take the opportunity to highlight aspects that particularly appeal to or worry them. Instead, I want to return to how Conservatives would achieve more with less of our council taxpayers' money. For example, our community is full of highly skilled and knowledgeable experts in many subjects. We know, don't we, that the community teams have created neighbourhood plans, and these have done a great job with applications frequently assessed against these policies. Local people are truly the greatest community-based asset that Mole Valley has at its disposal. And local people want to be actively involved in their districts and services. So why, we should ask ourselves, is the administration spending £250,000 on expensive management consultants to do feasibility studies next year? Surely the folks at Transition Dorking could produce a technical support for energy efficiency grant applications? Don't we have local building planners, architects and surveyors that would volunteer to produce a feasibility study for Dorking Halls? Wouldn't a local historian review the archiving for Pitbrook House? We have digital experts that would happily look at technology efficiency opportunities. Our local people are a real missed opportunity here, and yet it is them that are being asked to pay the price too. The capital plan presented for the coming year helpfully paints a picture of the corporate strategy. But the challenge might be in topics that no longer feature for investment, such as the rolling programme of playground enhancements across the district that dropped out last year. Our playgrounds deliver a crucial space for local children, including those with nowhere else to play. We really must not let this drift to the back of our minds. In the meantime, the capital plan is one of the council investing its money in car parks, not parks. But what about the future? After the COVID impact rolls off, if they do, this budget leaves a lot unsaid. Take Dorking Halls, for example. This year sees a 345% increase in the budgeted support from taxpayers to Dorking Halls. Bless you. That's approaching a £4.50 levy for every woman, man and child in the district. That clearly isn't sustainable. A Conservative administration would look at the options to protect the halls from future financial pressures, whether that's about greater commercialisation or a change in governance structure. It is simply not right to put the halls at risk for the future. Finally, people across Mole Valley have been telling me that they think the Liberals don't know what they're doing with the council's finances. Now, to be fair, I don't think that's true. I think it's clear from the budget papers the administration recognises the impact of their spending and charging plans. They know that the car parking cost rise will reduce activity in our high streets. They know that their income schemes are far from certain. And they know that the council faces £1.3 million of cuts in just 12 months' time. The people of Mole Valley need to know all of that, and we will make sure that they do, and that they know what we would do differently if they elect a Conservative administration in the months to come.
Thank you, Councillor. Members will be aware that a budget amendment has been proposed by Councillor David Hawksworth and seconded by Councillor David Harper. So, Councillor Hawksworth, could I invite you to put forward your amendment to the Council, and could I remind you that you have up to 5 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We appreciate the difficulties of this Council producing a balanced budget, has already been pointed out, for this coming year. It's a particularly difficult times. But at the same time, we were most disappointed not to see more provision being made to address the climate change emergency this Council has recognised, and also the expansion of the tree and countryside work of the Parks Department in relation to the emphasis placed in the corporate strategy on improving biodiversity in Mole Valley. You'll also be very aware after the last few days of the need to have proper inspections and more frequent inspections of trees in relation to tree safety, with a large number of trees coming down which actually were on some of these dangerous ones that did fall were actually owned by the council. We are also saddened to see the deletion of the small community grant scheme, because we don't believe that reliance on the lottery that we've established will be really appropriate for that. And a lack of commitment to explore long-term options, particularly in relation to revenue generation and a consideration of its built estate, including the buildings we're in now, next door, and of course Pitbrook itself. In order to start to address these long-term concerns, we're just proposing a few small amendments to the budget as follows. To reduce the salary budget to reflect the persistent recruitment delays and ongoing salary savings due to vacant posts, with a saving of about 80,000. Also, as part of that, we would obviously like the desirability of filling particular posts to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. To defer the spending on the consultants for the future development of the Dorking and Leatherhead leisure centres, to enable that report to take into account the findings of the consultants' report on the possible expansion of Dorking halls. To reduce the chairman's civic budget by an additional 3,000, which I understand the chairman would be happy about. But more importantly, perhaps, put the council's allowances pay rise at 0 for this year, with a saving of about 6,000. We don't really see why we should actually necessarily follow what is done for the staff. And we do need to help our residents where we can. These savings taken together will enable us to retain the small community grant scheme, so we have a flexible small pot available for initiatives that come through and aren't eligible for other schemes. To employ a tree and health safety officer in the Parks Department, initially on a 12-month fixed-term contract, to work with the tree and countryside officer, currently vacant, to progress the assessment and maintenance programme for trees on all council properties, including parks, playgrounds and public routes in its sites of nature conservation interest, in a timely manner. And to invest 15,000 from the one-off consultant saving to progress the installation of the electric charging points in the Ashted Peace and Royal Car Park, where the connection points have been just sitting there for several years. We know that progress is being made across the district in this direction, but we really feel that the time has come to act. And finally, to increase the scope of the consultancy work regarding the layout and expansion of the Dorking halls by approximately a third, to include investigation of options for a truly environmentally friendly municipal office at a cost of 13,000. This proposed additional spending balances the savings that we propose and have been checked by the 151 officer. So I commend these suggestions to you for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I ask Councillor David Harper if he wishes to second the motion and speak now?
I do wish to second it. Thank you, Chairman. May I speak after any other comments received?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, are there any members wish to speak to this amendment? I see Councillor Bridget Kendrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I wish to thank you for bringing this amendment forward. It shows that you've really considered the budget and have actually proactively taken to put some ideas down on paper, which I think is to be commended. However, I think something we need to understand in terms of this amendment is that the bulk of what it proposes relates on the first savings proposal, so I will address most of my comments to this. It is, in fact, the Chief Executive's responsibility to ensure that we have an appropriate resources in place to deliver the Council's agreed plans and services. And there are already processes in place where post becomes vacant, even the most critical ones, to consider whether that particular post should be recruited to immediately, deferred, or whether in the short term there are other ways to carry the duties of that particular post. As I said, this is true for every single post and for every single, regardless of criticality. These are the operational issues for the CEO, not political ones. And the same operational decisions we made about recruitment, holding posts vacant, employing interim, temporary staff irrespective of the level of any vacancy factor built into the staffing budget. But Historically, the council has applied a vacancy factor of 3% into staffing budgets, which has been a tried and trusted figure, and this amendment would increase them to around 4%. It is true that the world, let alone this council, has seen in the past year experienced unprecedented levels of staff turnover, but in some areas it is proving increasingly difficult to cost. But however, rather than leaving a saving, this can actually lead to greater costs because the work still has to be done. The budget still has to be prepared, grants have to be distributed, council tax has to be collected. And finance is actually a good example of this, where having interim staff to cover vacancies which are being recruited for has actually led to £10,000 a month above the staff budget. Not doing this would result in services in the annual plan not being delivered. So I personally am comfortable with the 3% vacancy factor as a plausible figure. I actually see the most likely outcome of this amendment is that we'd still have to employ the resources necessary to deliver the council plans and service objectives, and then we could actually then put more money through to into the next year overspending in the budget, which I think is a real risk. In terms of the Dorking Leatherhead Leisure Centre contracts, it's a very lengthy and complex process, which is absolutely critical to delivering the well-being and is exceptionally needed in Leatherhead. Too often I've seen businesses leave working on complex procurement too late, and therefore you get timelines and how often people just go with the existing providers, and in our world that would be at a lower amount of revenue. I think the civic reception one is an interesting one because it is for next year, so the current chairman, whilst he might be comfortable, would not actually be sitting at that table. It's the Queen's Jubilee year, and it is an event for the community which has not got together for 2 years. And it's not just us, it's for the community. It's for some of those leaders who are at the Grange, who I've sat next to, and some community from our religious communities. And I think they deserve it. We already have one of the most meagre offerings across Surrey, quite frankly. But I think given it's the Queen's Jubilee year, I actually think there's a reason to actually say that we should go ahead when we have already reduced it. I'm going to stop there for time because I think you're looking at your clock. But I think it was right to focus on those because without those, none of the rest is actually balanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patricia Wiltshire, I saw you next.
Thank you, Chairman. I take on board all that's been said this evening, but one factor and it's come over the last few days particularly, of paramount importance to all the residents of Mold Valley is safety. And we are blessed in a way in Mold Valley in that we have so many trees. Surrey, as we know, is the most wooded county in England, in Britain actually, and we have more than our fair share of trees. Councillor Hawksworth and I have been going out inspecting trees this week with some of the parks officers, and we've been identifying diseases for them and so on. And some of our trees are in a terrible state, and some of them are jolly unsafe. And we've lost one of our key officers in the Parks Department who actually dealt with trees all the time. So we have a minimal staff there. And I do feel that the recommendation to employ, or in some capacity, some competent, well-qualified person to look at trees, to check on trees, and to act, actually, to take down trees and modify them wherever necessary, is critical. We've had several come down in Ashted, I'm sure it's the same over Mold Valley and other places in Mold Valley. And we have one at the moment that's in critical state right next to a playground. And we are actually very worried, and we do feel that there should be some additional help in the Parks Department for this specific purpose, whatever our budget says. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other member wish to talk? Councillor David Preedy, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I looked at this really from the perspective of the Standing Budget Panel, because the Leader of the Opposition has described the process we've been through. Those of you who haven't seen it may not appreciate that it does have some of the characteristics of the Spanish Inquisition, as portfolio holders are quizzed on their proposals in public without the support of any officers. But I thought it might be useful to try and apply the same approach to, in particular, the major saving, which is identified in this amendment, the 80,000 budget saving. Well, when we were looking at the other proposals, we looked especially at any soft savings, and we pushed hard to see whether these actually could be reflected in cash terms. And on the whole, we could find where the cash saving would come through. I'm not sure about this one. I mean, the portfolio holder has described some of the concerns about it, and it seems to me there's a number picked. I don't know how 80,000 was reached, but I'm very concerned that the reality of not filling posts is that you end up having to have more temporary officers taking on those roles, which actually incurs additional expense rather than less. So I really feel this wouldn't meet the level of scrutiny that the Standing Budget Panel has applied to the other proposals. And without that, the rest of it falls apart because it doesn't have the money to support the rest of the balanced budget. So on that basis, I can't support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other member? Oh, sorry, Councillor Claire Malcolmson, thank you. So I couldn't see your hand behind the leader's head. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to respond to the tree issue. Of course, there are some trees, we are all aware of trees being blown down, and, especially since Friday. But I'd just like to reassure people that only yesterday I'm on the AOMB board, I was speaking to the AOMB board for us to work together with CPRE, Nature England, the Wildlife Trust, and to increase and approach government to actually make TPOs more stringent. I wrote a letter to Mr. Jenrick about 18 months ago and had a very disappointing response. So we want to join together to actually try and actually save some more trees and plant some more trees. And I'm sure they're very aware that we're once we hope our local plan comes through, we're encouraging a net gain of 20% biodiversity and new developments. I can understand their concern, but funds are funds, and the way we are working is in a slightly different direction. But I can't agree with all the amendment, but that part of having an officer I do actually agree with. But I can't support the whole amendment, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Clayton-Wellman.
Thank you, Chairman. I just thought I should make a brief comment on the proposal for EV points in Ashton Peace Memorial Hall car park. I do very much sympathise with Councillor Hawksworth's desire. We all really want to get these things moving in as quickly as possible. Obviously, as Councillor Kendrick has mentioned, the means on the other end of the amendment in order to get the money to do it aren't really suitable, unfortunately, to do so. But nevertheless, I thought I should still comment that with regard to the proposal itself for the EV points, in the original design of the refurbishment scheme, there wasn't the funding to put EV points in. It was simply to put in the power arrangements. Thankfully, we have now organised and negotiated the funding in order to be able to put them in. And as has been mentioned, and I'm sure lots of people will say this tonight, we're all trying to get the best value for our residents. Like Councillor Friend made a big piece about none of us want to waste residents' money. And one of the key ways to do that is to get the best possible deal across the whole district and to invest thoroughly, thoughtfully, and make sure that we buy, in a lot of cases, in bulk and in a system that will be integrated and work together to make sure that we reduce those costs and make sure we have something fit for the future and that has no pitfalls in it and is integrated, as I say, across the district. And with that in mind, we are very close to being able to move forward with the project, which I hope that Councillor Hawksworth will be pleased to hear and anticipate a full rollout this calendar year of EV points across the district.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other member? If not, could I speak to this amendment as well, with your permission? Thank you. I wanted to speak in favour, particularly of the consultant savings, because when I looked at having it appears we've got two separate consultants' reports going on concerning the same facilities. One looking at changes to this building, and then the other one looking at how we run this building. And to me, it appears illogical that you've got two people set off on separate trails, one sort of saying how best to run this building, and then another group of people being paid to say how we might change the building, because the conclusions to me seem to be therefore illogical, that one may have based their report thinking it's staying as is, and the other paid consultants are saying no, we should be expanding it and offering this facility. So that's the thinking behind having the reports phased. Thank you. I noted you want to speak later. And it therefore makes sense that you consider one report before the other, and the delay would provide a source of funding. And to expand, in fact, the report for including an environmentally friendly municipal office could also both demonstrate the council's commitment to climate change and also produce a saving for council taxpayers. Those of us from Ashtead will particularly remember the impact of winds and trees, and you'll appreciate the heartfelt sense that the wish for the extra knowledge on tree safety supports that. And in terms of the small community grants fund, myself, previous chairman and chairman to come, will have seen the benefit of the community grants fund and the work that's done. And when we've compared that income with the resources required to generate a similar amount of money through the lottery funding, we just think that local small groups who do find funding particularly hard to come will suffer, because to get a similar amount of income, you're looking at having possibly 19,000 people subscribe to the lottery for a year to generate the same type of profits to generate that income. And with the squeeze on funding of people's own personal finances, the message does appear that small community grants will therefore suffer rather than find a new way forward. So that was my personal thinking. Thank you for indulging me in speaking. And Councillor David Draper is next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Far be it from me to correct you, but you mentioned that the saving could be for the expansion of this building. In fact, it's nothing to do with this building at all. This is a sports centre, and the expansion will be of Dorking Halls, which is not a connected building. I think we have to be careful we don't see these as linked. The leisure centre contract is due for renewal of both leisure centres. That's nothing to do with rebuilding them, nothing to do with extending them. They're totally different things. This is something we have to have in place, ready for when those contracts face renewal. At a very difficult time within the leisure industry and what we need to see. So that's on one side, renewal of contracts, the best for the people of Mole Valley, and as several have mentioned, the importance of Leatherhead as a community asset. The second one is just looking at whether we can expand Dorking Halls, provide for it in the future in the best way possible. It's nothing to do with running, or it's nothing to do with a contract. It's to look at it in development. Therefore, number 4 on this amendment is again a very confused thing, that somehow people who are going to advise us on the future of arts in Mole Valley are going to advise us on an environmentally friendly municipal office. That isn't the brief at all. One's looking at the future of a possible extended cinema come theatre space, which I'm not sure whether we could describe the council chamber as a theatre. Maybe we could. But I'm not sure environmentally friendly is the same as looking at what we're thinking of for Dorking Halls. So I find those two clauses, A, incorrect, B, confusing, and I couldn't support them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Raj Hark, I see.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make some comment about the saving of this salary, persistent recruitment. I mean, any institution or any successful business, depending upon the good long-time staffing. Without a proper staff, no business can run successfully, nor any institution. Now, I know under this current situation, it is probably, if we could use part-time in order to save some money under these current circumstances. However, this, at the same time, we have to bear in mind, then we have to reduce the services. When we provide the services, then it may not be the same rate or same pace as we could have provided with the long-time staff. So therefore, I think it is a saving though that can be made, but unfortunately, it's not the one that I will be very keen to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lynn Brooks, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would like to make an observation that we have constantly heard from the administration time and time again that they want to hear our ideas, they want to hear alternatives. And what we see before us is an amendment that actually has quite some nice ideas. Maybe we all don't agree with all of them, but there are some really nice ones in there that should warrant a proper discussion and should have been considered. And some of the sums are actually quite small, and it would have been nice if across the table they could have actually incorporated some of them. It wouldn't take much to reduce a few things here and there. Having worked on budgets most of my life, I can assure you these items could have been agreed and put through without this difficulty that is being expressed. So I'm very disappointed that the collaboration that's very often talked about is clearly missing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul Kennedy, I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I too would like to thank the proposer and seconder of this motion. There are obviously things in this motion that I like and would love to be able to include in the budget. It's a shame, following Councillor Brooks's comments, that we didn't have earlier notice of them, because it's been a 2-month process, and that there have been opportunities, obviously, for further suggestions to be made. Unfortunately, I'm unable to support the amendment because, as others have said, there is a difficulty in achieving the savings that are identified. Going through the detail of all the savings that were gone through in detail by the Standing Budget Panel, there are a significant number of those savings which are actually already based on vacancies that already exist, and indeed are projected as well. And so it would be duplication to claim that we can make those additional savings. There is an allowance already in the budget for vacancies. I believe it's 3%. And we do need to be careful about targeting vacancies, because I'm also this council's representative on the Police and Crime Panel, where we've been considering the Surrey Police budget. And this year, Surrey Police have been told to target an 8% vacancy rate for staff. And Surrey Police senior officers have confirmed to us that does in effect mean cuts. It's a sort of way of securing cuts, but without actually identifying where the cuts will be. But if one looks at the staff that might be affected, an 8% vacancy rate for PCSOs means 11 fewer PCSOs than the Surrey Police feel they need, 11 fewer investigating and forensic officers than Surrey Police think they need. And that's faced with a 3.5% solved burglary rate. Fewer contact staff to deal with 999 or 101 calls, where the average is 5 minutes. So I'm afraid that we cannot rely on that route. We have already identified the savings that are available from vacancies.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other members. Councillor David Harper, would you like to now second the motion?
Thank you, Chairman. How long do I have?
You have 3 minutes.
Oh, that's not very long, for all I've got to say. Councillor Kendrick mentioned the vacancy rate. Paul Kennedy and Councillor Breedy asked how is it calculated. And it has been said that the vacancy rate has been static and stable at 3% for as long as they can remember. And we know that the churn rate is now about 25% a year. That churn rate is a lot higher than it was. If If the vacancy allowance arises because of churn, then with a higher churn rate, you can move the vacancy rate up from 3 to 4%, which is what Councillor Kendrick said 80,000 represents, and is in fact extremely likely to happen. So I think that explains how we find that 80,000. And Councillor Preedy, in his ignorance, had declared that he was going to vote against it. He didn't understand it. Now he understands it. I know by implication that means that he's informed, so he's enlightened and now possibly could support it. Councillor Wellman explained there are good reasons to be optimistic about the implementation, which is great news, but maybe another small amount will help overcome obstacles or give us another opportunity if they arise. So we really put this amendment down to give some aspiration and vision. Firstly, because of the small community grant scheme. The main reason this was identified is because these type of applications to the community typically have a very high impact figure for very little. Compared to spending 15,000 inside our house, spending 15,000 outside our house has a huge impact and puts the council at the centre of the community. You are effectively withdrawing from the community that you serve, and it's a very poor message to give out, that the council is looking after itself and its own pay rises, but I'm sorry, community grants, small community grant users, you can't have anything. I think that's a very poor message to send. I think we have got a bit of a budget in for a health and safety officer for trees. This is because ash trees are dying, and at the moment tree surgeons can climb those trees, but when they're dead they can't climb them, and that means you spend more with a cherry picker. So we absolutely need to cut these trees down before we can't climb them. In the long run, this is going to save you, the council, money, not cost you more. Thirdly, we wanted to meet the lofty ambition that the Liberal Democrats declared for the climate emergency, and that was to help install these charging points. And a budget is about what you stand for, and putting even a small amount up for what you stand for is really important when you're deciding the priorities for your allocations of your budgets. Fourthly, the vision. Yes, Chairman. Yeah. Oh, yes, lots of time left. With the change to, this is my last point, if I may.
Thank you.
With the change to hybrid working running through contracts, we no longer need a Pitbrook the size that coped with 100% occupancy rate. If people work for 2 days, then there's 60% less space requirement.
I must ask you to sum up.
I'm going to. It's a very important point, though, because Councillor Draper expressed confusion about this. Our point here is that if we ask the consultant to look at building a new office with the theatre, with the cinema, whatever's appropriate, within the same context, we get more value for our money, we could move the offices over the road to behind.
Thank you.
And therefore redevelop. I'm final point, Chairman, and I do appreciate.
I have to be fair to everybody.
Yes, you do, and you are very fair, and I'm normally fair back. But this is really important. We're low on capital, and to redevelop that site would give us capital receipts.
Thank you.
For
Thank you very much.
Refurbishing the leisure centres.
Councillor Hawksworth, as the move of the motion, I believe I'm right in asking you to now sum up the debate, or does it go back to Councillor Bridget Kendrick? Councillor Bridget Kendrick, could you please sum up the debate on the amendment? Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I think there's been lots of comments made. I think overall, I would have loved to have sat down across the table. The standing budget panel was one where the issue of salaries could really have been debated and discussed and tested on. It wasn't raised, and to do so with a few days' notice does make things difficult. But the risk of creating overspend on that 80,000 because of the way that it could increase the amount of interim staff, for me, makes the risk to everything else unsustainable. There is lots of good here. I've already said in my additional speech that a mid-year review and looking to bring small community grants, if indeed I'm wrong and there is surplus in salaries, would be the first thing I do. I think I've been very clear on that. But it is the sort of thing that I am very glad to see. I wish I'd seen it earlier and we could have had a full and frank earlier discussion on that. But overall, I cannot support this amendment. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. So I have to tell Council, as outlined in Standing Order 26.6, a recorded vote must be taken in respect of any vote on the budget when determining the annual budget. Miss Davis will therefore read out each member's name, and members should indicate, please, whether they are in favour of, against or abstaining from the proposed budget amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Roger Adams.
Against.
Tim Ashton.
For.
Lynn Brooks.
Abstain.
Simon Budd.
Abstain.
Leslie Bushnell.
Against.
Helen Clack.
For.
James Chambers.
Abstain.
Sarah Chambers.
Abstain.
Chris Coughlin.
Against.
Margaret Cooksey.
Against.
Stephen Cooksey.
Against.
Mary Cooper.
For.
Elizabeth Daly.
Against.
David Draper.
Against.
James Friend.
Abstain.
Nancy Goodacre. Raj Hack.
Against.
David Harper.
For.
David Hawksworth.
For.
Rosemary Hobbs.
Against.
Mary Huggins.
Abstain.
Chris Hunt.
For.
Tracy Keeley.
Abstain.
Bridget Kendrick.
Against.
Paul Kennedy.
Against.
Claire Malcolmson.
Against.
Simon Moss.
Abstain.
Richard Moyes.
Abstain.
Emma Norman.
Against.
Paul Potter.
Against.
David Preedy.
Against.
Alan Riley. Elsie Rotham. Caroline Salmon.
Against.
Kira Vivian Robinson.
Against.
Hazel Watson.
Against.
Patricia Wiltshire.
For.
Clayton Wellman.
Against.
Nick Wright.
Against.
Charles Yarwood.
Abstain.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's 8 for the amendment, 22 against and 10 abstentions. The amendment is lost.
Thank you, members, for that. The proposed budget amendments, therefore, are not agreed. So could I please invite members now to speak to the main budget and council tax resolution recommendations? I think the leader of the council reserved his right to speak. Would you like to speak first?
No, Chairman, I'll stay
Still
until later in the
reserved.
debate.
Thank you. I see Councillor Hazel Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. In supporting the 2022-23 budget for the Council, I would like to highlight some of the most positive aspects within it. Firstly, the popular garden waste collection service has recently restarted following the national shortage of HGV drivers, which resulted in the service being temporarily suspended. This has been achieved by providing increased payments to recruit and retain HGV drivers. I'm delighted that all missed garden waste collections will be refunded to residents when they pay for a further year's service in the summer. If there is a shortfall from the refund from the contractor, I note that it will come from the Council's reserves and will not impact on the services provided by the Council in the coming year. Furthermore, the proposed budget has frozen the garden waste collection charge for residents next year and recognises that this is another small step towards bringing it into line with the charges levied by our fellow councils in the Joint Waste Solution contract. Secondly, the Council has recently announced the good news that it will be introducing a new resident season ticket, which will enable residents to park in District Council car parks at a lower cost. Furthermore, the season tickets will be much more flexible than at present, allowing residents to purchase permits for different time limits or set days each week on a pro rata basis. This will be of particular help to residents who live in Dorking or Leatherhead but have no off-street parking, and the new lower price is much more affordable. Thirdly, the Council is working towards providing more on-street parking enforcement at evenings and Sundays on double yellow lines to stop inconsiderate parking, blocking roads on our towns, in our towns and villages, which can be a safety hazard. Fourthly, the budget continues the successful holiday activities launched by the Council in 2021 to provide a range of fun-filled activities free of charge for young people run by local clubs using council recreation grounds across the district. The feedback from both the participant young people and their parents was very positive and so well worth continuing. These are all real and positive changes which have been made to the way in which the Council operates, and I thus commend this budget to the Council for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. The next speaker I have is the Vice Chairman of the Council, Councillor Paul Potter.
Thank you, Chairman, very much for talking. I think the team should be commended on the budget. I think a lot of hard work's gone into it. There's a couple of things, really. I'd like to say I agree with Bridget on the Queen's Jubilee. I know I'm the Chairman and probably a bit biased, but she has done a good job for this country over many years. And this will be her last one, unless she, by some miracle, lives to 115, I think I worked it out at. But we should celebrate it, and I know Brockham's celebrating it very well. But talking of Brockham, I'd just like to say, we've heard a lot of negativity about the budget. The Parish Council in Brockham have said that the budget was a well-balanced and a prudent budget, and they're very happy that the planning services, the pre-planning services, are going to be reintroduced for residents, which a lot of residents do like to find it difficult to get any advice without actually paying for it or without having to make a full application. So I think it should be noted that not everything in the budget is negative, and I think over the last 2 years it's been very difficult for everyone to balance books, whether it be us or your household budgets. So, you know, I think well done, really.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Any other member? Councillor Moss.
Thank you, Chair. Can I place on record my thanks to the officers for their hard work with this document. Council, our communities know significantly less about what we do in this room than I think some would like to think. Residents just want their bins collected, car parking to be fair, and for planning applications to be given due consideration. They also want better than adequate recreation facilities for their children. It was a particularly proud time for hundreds of kids in my ward when the playground at 40-foot Park was rebuilt under the previous administration. My youngest son turns 3 on Saturday, and I think he would join his brother and I in saying that maintaining and improving his local playground, and indeed Cock Lane in Fetcham, another he uses on a weekly basis, is not a superfluous expense. I assume this will join the local plan in being omitted in Lib Dem leaflets between now and May. We talk of having to make tough decisions, yet this budget includes allowance increases for members in line with staff, who do undoubtedly deserve an increase for their continued efforts on behalf of residents. None of us here serve our communities for financial gain, and in my view, in line with what Councillor Harper has said, this budget sends totally the wrong message to our residents about our priorities, regardless of the sums involved. I will not support this missed opportunity of a budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Harper.
I promise to take the amount that I exceeded off my comments now.
Oh, thank you. That's about 48 seconds.
Right, okay, thank you. It's been mentioned, garden waste collection is back on its feet, and it's been mentioned that yellow line enforcement will be improved. So, well, regarding garden waste, it's really, I have two views on this. Yes, it should be back on its feet, but claiming that we're aligned with neighbouring districts only really reinforces that we're further misaligned from the market price, which councils are perfectly well aware of, that private collectors cost 10 quid when we're charging £2.50. You know, if I heard the council was selling my favourite car for 2,500 where my local garage was selling it for 10, I think council would know that I'd be coming to them for my car, not the local garage. The council is perfectly entitled to move a price for garden waste collection using the power of its collections, which is its dust carts and its other infrastructure and its people that are probably the most important part of that, to a market price. This budget doesn't seem to have considered moving it up, instead of which they've consolidated and not moved it at all. And we know how important this service is and how appreciated it is by residents. I think that's a missed opportunity. There's an elephant in the room as well that we haven't discussed at all, which is the refurbishment of the Dorking and Leatherhead leisure centres. It's going to take capital expenditure to bring these leisure centres up to a point where somebody's going to want to run them for us at anything like the rates that we currently enjoy. And that's not a red flag, that's a red flag for me. That's not mentioned in this budget and it's completely missing. I think there's a big hole we're going to fall into, and we need to be aware that we need to find that capital reserve from somewhere. As regards to the promised supervision of yellow lines, at last I heard there were 2 parking attendants where we should have 6, part of the vacancy rate, and I'm sceptical that that's actually going to materialise for the benefit of residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. And you nearly, just 6 seconds on average over too much, but thank you. Councillor Mary Huggins.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really concerned about this budget. I find that the knocking off of £800,000 of services and the proposed spending of £250,000 on consultants for various studies somewhat of an insult to our residents. As Councillor Friend has said, it is their money we are spending, they whom we represent, and this is not the way to treat them. Again, with regard to the consultants' work, as Councillor Friend has said, we should be using the vast wealth of local expertise in our district. I am disappointed that there will no longer be 48 small community groups delighted with money from the Small Community Grants Fund, which often is the difference between whether they can go ahead with the project or not. And I agree with you, Chairman, that I don't believe the Community Lottery fills this gap. However, I was glad to hear this evening that the Cabinet member is hoping to reinstate this. I hope she will do so as soon as possible. But I am particularly concerned for our staff. Staff are the greatest asset of any organisation. There is a saving via proposal E27, which could deliver £129,000 of savings from increased efficiency in service management, based upon a precise outlook of the management structure from the Chief Executive. Our staff have had a difficult 2 years, working from home, unable to access normal assistance and joined up working by being with colleagues. Members and the public alike have often found it takes longer or becomes more difficult to access information and advice during this time. We have all become at times somewhat overwhelmed with the pressures and worries that have been experienced by us all. Our staff all work very, very hard indeed, and I thank them for that. But I'm very concerned that with vacancies not necessarily being filled, the work of the lever sometimes being shared out amongst the remaining members of the department, that this pressure will only grow. The budget paper's detail on this saving, and even from the standing budget panel notes, is very light. I wonder if the leader might be able to give some comfort that this is an achievable saving and will not impact on the health of our valuable staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patricia Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I have some concerns. There are concerns with the budget, but I'm very pleased that they've managed to save so much money across the board. We're constantly told, and we have been told up to now, that they're as lean as they ever could be, and yet they are actually saving money. So is it now skeletal? I'm beginning to wonder. But anyway, I have concerns about the way certain aspects are written. Because if you look at page 136 at the exploiting technology and reviewing the way we carry out tasks and processes across the organisation, a saving of £60,000, I don't know what that's all about because it's not clear, it's not specific. It's like looking through the end of a thick-ended bottle. There's nothing specific there for me to know what that £60,000 is for. It's so vague. And I'm also very concerned about the proposal for a cost of £30,000 to move documents out to Pickbrook House. I think that we have volunteers to sort out the river mole, we have volunteers and all sorts of things. I would have thought we could get volunteers to do a simple job like that. £30,000 to move documents. Why? I would just like to ask why.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard Moyes is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Just to further underline Councillor Friend and Councillor Huggins' comments, Councillor Friend reminded us all that we do have areas of deprivation in Mole Valley. I have 2 areas of social housing in Bookham North Ward. And just to underline, members, the cost of the proposed external consultants, it's actually 10 times the national UK average salary. So 10 households in Mole Valley will be considering, what on earth are we spending 10 times their annual salary? I work in a position where if I'm going to spend £10 in a day on my commercial operations, I would expect to spend 11. So I'd be really interested to see a definitive statement from this administration what their expectation is in spending £260,000 regarding a saving. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think this budget really works for improving our services. It is totally focused on savings and inward looking. It's not at all what our residents are really wanting from us as we come out of a pandemic. They want us to support us and be bold with our ideas, not to be reliant on consultants. That's already been mentioned a few times. I have 2 questions. The claim that it is balanced assumes an in and out budget, that the money coming in is the money going out. But we've just voted for potentially £3 million of borrowing, not really the impression that this budget is trying to give. So maybe some clarification there would be helpful. Also, I would like to draw the attention, in May last year, this council presented a report from KPMG, initially looking at the Surrey-wide unitary, but highlighting that the only way smaller districts and boroughs could survive was potentially working in partnership with other authorities via memorandums of understanding. Yet in this budget today, we can see no such shared services, responsibilities and obligations to work with other authorities, which would clearly give us a saving and also would allow us again to reduce our reliance on consultants and actually maybe use some expertise from other areas. So I do believe that this doesn't actually serve our residents very well at all, and it's actually lacking in vision, lacking in leadership, and it's actually a pretty poor document all round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor James Chambers.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all the officers and fellow councillors who have been involved with the budget. It's a good team effort. I've reviewed the standing budget panel notes and see that the monitoring of the council's position is going to continue on a weekly and monthly basis to ensure the council's financial situation can deliver this budget today. Would it be possible, bearing in mind the level of savings required, to achieve a balanced budget being £800,000 in the next year, that by the end of September, in 6 months' time, a detailed report be provided on the progress to date? In essence, wishing to see more information than what the outturn report will produce, with each individual area, the progress made to date, and what that actually means in terms of service. Would the Cabinet member be happy to provide this?
Thank you. Perhaps that will be dealt with as part of the summing up. Thank you. The next member I saw was Councillor Raj Hark.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank all the team and the officers who have actually taken really hard extra effort in preparing this budget. It is not easy to balance the book, especially we have lived under the most difficult time. I think everybody will agree, and hopefully we are coming out of it. But it is extremely hard time that we have faced. Meeting all the costs meeting all the expenditure, and at the same time maintaining everything, all the services that are provided by the council. It's not easy. So therefore, I think under the circumstances that this budget has been prepared accordingly, I think not everything is correct, not everything is really good in this budget, but however, the budget that has been prepared in this time, in this most unprecedented time that we have faced, I think this is something we have to commend for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on my list is Councillor Sarah Chambers.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm asking this question from a resident who has been looking through all these budgets, and she is somebody who's a bit sick and tired at the moment. Anything that's not a good service, oh, it's all down to COVID, you can't have this, it's all down to COVID. And she's very concerned that Councillor Kendrick said it was a cost of COVID of 1.2 million. Now that is taxpayers' money. Could we have some more detail where the 1.2 million comes from? Because as far as I'm aware, we're not treating COVID patients, we got support, and that is a huge amount of money. And it's very easy to band about, we made efficiencies, oh, it's all COVID. My constituents want to know the details. It's their hard-earned money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Preedy, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a few comments on some of the things we've heard. Firstly, I was somewhat puzzled by the comments from Councillor Brooks about the borrowing. The up to 3 million cap on borrowing is specifically to cover capital expenditure, not the revenue budget. Yet she seems to be relating it to the revenue budget. And I'm somewhat puzzled by that, but I just want to clarify that for people who aren't aware of that. The budget is balanced in the sense that the revenue budget is planned to be covered by the incomings and the outgoings. So the borrowing, if it is needed, and of course this isn't the first time this council has borrowed. We did borrow a significant amount to undertake the asset investment programme. So the borrowing is not new for this council, but it is new to fund capital projects for the good of the community. So I just want to clarify that one. The second one, we've heard from several councillors about using volunteers to do much more for us. We hear from the Leader of the Opposition that this will create innovative use of the community volunteers. And I wonder if this is the same innovation that the national government undertook in setting up its specialist VIP lanes for provision of PPE during the pandemic crisis. I think there are risks in not having people who are contracted, particularly a way of getting advice which you need to depend on, and the use of consultants is appropriate in certain cases. And the final point was the £60,000 on looking at digital infrastructure and process improvement. When I took over as Chair of Development Management, I was appalled to find that the document management system was apparently, we were the only organisation who were using this software. If it crashed over a weekend, we had to wait till Monday because someone was back at work to get it back up again. That's a state of neglect that we can't afford to let our systems get into. And with a background in IT, I think it's absolutely time that we looked at where we can make improvements, and this can open the way for further savings. So I commend this budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on my list is Councillor Tracy Keeley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to note that the charges have increased between 3 to 5% on community transport dial-a-ride and for telecare with a high budgeted income of 1.1 million. I'd like to clarify if this 1.1 million includes some element of putting funds aside to replace assets as they need replacing. In summary, what I'm asking, do we have a fully funded capital replacement programme for these services?
Thank you, Councillor. The next councillor is Councillor Kira Vivian Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I struggle with some of the lack of consistency of comments that I have heard this evening, and so much of it actually relates to the officers and the staffing of the council. And it does sometimes seem to me that councillors pay lip service when they thank the officers for the efforts that they have put into maintaining the services to residents, particularly over the last 2 years. And the reason that I struggle with the lack of consistency is earlier this evening we heard an amendment saying that we should maintain more vacancies and that our officers should be able to cover the lack of staff in those posts. At the same time, I believe Councillor Friend earlier said that officers should be doing all of the feasibility studies in relation to the Dorking halls, and if not officers, then building surveyors that we have, and if not those, I believe he said volunteers, and I have to say that I cannot see any volunteers sort of drawing up plans for Dorking halls, and I would question whether it's appropriate for volunteers to be emptying confidential documents from Pitbrook House. And then we have Councillor Moyes criticising the use of consultants and saying that we should be using our own staff. And if I turn to some of the proposals in my own portfolio, those are relating to digital improvements, and those savings have been as a result of the review of software and IT, but those are also staffing savings. So we are already making 2 to 3 posts vacant there, and we are making efficiencies to maximise the use of digital accessibility, whilst also maintaining accessibility for those who are not online. And that also leads into the one-off revenue spend proposal, which is a spend for an officer of the council, so to carry out a review, to look at how can the council's administration and potentially financial sort of range of services be reorganised on a whole scale way, so that we're not just touching at the edges. We're looking at the entire system of how the council is administered, and so that will be an internal officer role that is used to carry out that work and look at how further savings can be made. But this is all about officers and their services to us, and I think that some of the discussions and comments from this evening fail to recognise just how important those are, and that the officers cannot be expected to stretch indefinitely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next councillor on my list is Councillor Elizabeth Daly.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe this to be a fair, prudent and balanced budget, clearly setting out what is required to take us forward through in 22-23. And as our Chairman quoted a young Jewish refugee tonight, let's look forward. I have complete faith and confidence in Councillor Kendrick's expertise, and indeed the expertise of our officers within this building. And I am happy to look forward and support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to suspend the next speaker I had on my list because Councillor Moyes wishes to raise a point of order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wish to refer the comments made by Councillor Vivian Robinson. I very clearly stated that the intended spend on external consultants was equivalent to the average income of 10 UK households. At no time did I suggest we should be using our own staff instead of consultants. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The next speaker on the debate I have is Councillor Caroline Salmon.
Thank you, Chairman. I think one of the things that hasn't been recognised here is the way this budget was put together, which was done in a very careful way, where we looked at what could be saved and what couldn't. And there were items which were completely removed as not being something that was good to do. There's been a point made about the charges on dial-a-ride and telecare. What we've done in respect of the fees and charges, particularly on the community services, was look at what was fair, what was right to comply with roughly 4% across the board to match inflation. We'd love to not raise prices, but we can't not. We have to cover the costs and make a balanced budget. And what we tried to do was find things that would make as little impact as possible across our residents, especially taking into account the vulnerable, so that we know, for example, we could take away card and paper boxes because you all have recycle boxes. You can put card and paper in. So we're duplicating things. And this was done over a period of workshops where everybody worked very hard together to make the best choices, to make the savings that we have to make to balance the budget. In respect of the telecare and the dial-a-ride, I was asked if we are looking to replace things. We're actually looking to move from analog to digital, which is using technology effectively to make it better and easier to use. And the way that the telecare arc is working is changing all the time to give a better, more efficient service, with the introduction of the recent introduction of the first responders coming in. And we work a lot on trials to try and see how they'll work so that it will not only benefit us, it will benefit others across Surrey. There's a lot going on which is really, really positive. And what we want to do is to be able to keep those things going on and not try and be clever and be political and try and make points about it. We have to use consultants who are experts to make sure that what we are doing is got the best foundation, and then we can go and we can get funding when we don't have it. And all of these things help us move forward. We are in a position to move forward after 2 years of really not a very good time. And I think you should all be looking at this in a very positive way, because we have to move forward. We are at a starting block where we lost money because COVID cost the council money. And if you don't think that having something go on that went on costs us money, then I'm sorry, but you need to start thinking about how the world works.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got no more councillors on... Oh, Councillor Paul Kennedy, you haven't spoken on this motion, have you? So, Councillor Paul Kennedy, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just respond briefly to Councillor Sarah Chambers' question about where the £1.2 million comes from. It isn't extra spending. It's lost income because of COVID. So lost income from commercial income, from Dorking halls and so on. So that's the explanation, and that's the hole that had to be filled and has been filled. I'd just like to thank others, to join others in thanking the panel, the scrutiny panel, which reviewed the budget. It was very refreshing to see a report where the evidence corresponded to the findings, which corresponded to the recommendations. That was refreshing. So I welcomed that. Although I was disappointed today to be presented with a whole load of new ideas, I think I'm not sure that our residents really can understand how we've been reviewing this budget for 2 months, and we're not able as a council to actually get together and discuss how we can best serve our residents. And perhaps if I can add that as an addition to the recommendations of the panel. The only other point I'd like to make, there's been a lot of discussion about consultants. The reality is we, as others have said, receive the lowest government basic funding in the country, but there is other funding available, which we're required to bid for, essentially. And in order to do that, we need technical expertise. And so that's the reason we have to do it. I'm afraid it's another example of what Andy Burnham described last Thursday on Question Time, which is the government demanding we do things nationally, and then local Conservative councillors criticising councils for doing what the government demands. I think Andy Burnham called it the dishonesty of the modern Conservative Party. Disappointing to hear that. There are £250,000 happens to match what Surrey County Council spent on their failed single Surrey unitary bid, and it's half of what the Police and Crime Commissioner is going to increase her budget for, paid for through things like increased vacancy rates in Surrey Police, to increase her communications staff in order to promote her own role. So those are other examples. But overall, I'm delighted with this proposal and I'd like to thank everyone who's contributed to it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Margaret Cooksey, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of talk during this budget debate about garden waste service, and I think that is a reflection, really, of how important it is to all of our residents. And perhaps I should declare an interest because we have 2 garden waste bins, and they're invaluable to us as they are to so many people in the district. But what's been suggested is that we should increase the cost of the service. Well, the last administration should have learnt their lesson because they increased the cost of the garden waste service quite considerably. And as we said would happen, the numbers of people paying for the service dropped off remarkably. And it's taken quite some time to get the numbers back up again. And residents support the fact that they're getting value for money, particularly those who've been paying the vastly inflated costs of the private contractors. Now, I've learnt something tonight that I didn't know I was going to learn. Levelling up. Levelling up's one of those modern phrases that really doesn't mean anything at all, or can mean anything anybody wants it to mean. There is a view in the south of England that levelling up means levelling down here, and to a lot of extents, yes, that's what's happening. But what I've learnt tonight is what it really means, specifically to the Leader of the Opposition. Levelling up equals means testing. Now, I have instinctively opposed means testing my entire adult life, and I don't propose to start encouraging it now, particularly given the costs involved in the huge administrative nightmare that would ensue by having to introduce such an abomination. Interesting the things you learn, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just so that members are aware, I've actually got the big Levelling Up book that's been produced. I'm trying to wade my way through it. So perhaps on a future occasion I'll be able to espouse on that. But it's a big strategy that's obviously affecting lots of things. So thank you. Councillor Chris Cochrane, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm not entirely sure which meeting Councillor Brooks was at, where she's talking about this concern about borrowing, but at the Audit Committee meeting on the 27th of January, a majority of members enthusiastically endorsed the budget, including the extra borrowing. In fact, one member even described the £3 million possible extra borrowing as a non-event. That was me. Mr. Chairman, I said that because the £3 million potential extra borrowing is a rounding error compared to the Council's almost £200 million in assets in the property portfolio. And I said it because this administration is managing its finances so soundly that interest costs are actually falling relative to revenue. But most importantly, I said it because it is vital that this council invests in the services that are so critical to our residents. I care about the services for our residents because this morning my daughter Anna and the rest of her class at St Joseph's went swimming for their swimming lesson in this very building. We only need to look a few hundred metres away from here to see what failing to invest for our residents really means. Anna also likes to play at the stepping stones on the River Mole. Thankfully, she doesn't like to swim in it. Because the River Mole is a chocolatey brown colour because Thames Water has failed to invest in sewage treatment. On average, Thames Water has dumped raw sewage in our river once every single week for the last 4 years. Every single week. That's the worst record in the entire country. Disgracefully supported by our Conservative MP in Parliament when he failed to vote against stopping Thames Water just last October. Mr. Chairman, it seems that protecting Thames Water's £500 million in operating profit is more important to our MP than protecting our children from playing in a river full of sewage. It is vital, so I urge all members here to protect our services.
Chairman, I'm sorry, can I just ask you to suspend? I think Councillor Lynn Brooks has a point of order on what you're saying.
Well, one thing, there's a political statement going on which is irrelevant in this debate about the budget. And two, thank you for pointing out that he did vote for the £3 million increase in the Treasury management. But I would like to point out to Councillor Coghlan that him and his colleagues who voted it through had no awareness of the prudential code that they voted through, which I have clarified this evening with the Section 151 officer, which makes it quite clear what the reporting is going to be. So let's get our facts straight when we're talking in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Preedy, is it also a point of order on what's being said?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
I would like Councillor Brooks to withdraw her comment that the other members of the Audit Committee had no knowledge or understanding of the prudential indicators.
Councillor Brooks, did you want to?
Please explain why I should withdraw it.
Because it's not true.
I have an email from you saying that you hadn't read it. Would you like me to carry on?
We've had training on it. We've been talking about it. The Audit Committee have, they're not expected to be financial experts, but we do understand the prudential indicators. And we had a long and very informative debate on it. And I think to slur all of the committee members by saying they don't understand the prudential indicators is just false. And I would like it to be withdrawn.
Thank you. Okay, I'm in a tough position. What I'm going to say is, look, this is a heated meeting, and comments have been made both sides. I would like to ask Councillor Coghlan to finish off his speech, and I give him an extra, although the clock's going, you've got another minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But please keep to the budget.
I will. To be honest, Mr. Chairman, this stuff about financial ignorance from Councillor Brooks just shows a Conservative arrogance to investing in our services. And there are many members on this side who are highly experienced in business. Myself, I have 20 years in finance. I've studied business at the top business school in the world, amongst other things. But anyway, I would urge every member to vote for this budget because, as we've seen, unfortunately, we cannot stop our Conservative MP from dumping on the River Mole, but we can stop these Conservative members from dumping on Mole Valley.
Oh. Thank you. Councillor Clayton-Wellman on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Where to start? I suppose I should briefly just address the consultants things, which was raised many times and has been addressed from this side. But I kind of find it strange, this tack from the Conservative members, which seems to be their lead line, when, as far as I'm aware, it's basic Conservative policy to use the private sector as much as possible. And as has been made a note of, successive national governments have put local governments in a position where that's necessary. And in addition, we are in a position where there are all kinds of specialist skills and knowledge that we need, that it would be ridiculous for us to keep people on the payroll endlessly to come along and do a particular job once in a blue moon. It's edifying to hear there are lots of people who will do these jobs for free, but that's also something which doesn't seem to fit with Conservative morals either, which aren't really about giving much away for free as far as I understand it. On the specific use for Pitbrook House, it's not purely just for archiving documents, it's all of the transaction costs, all of the making the building ready. And for instance, one of the things that was raised was about using local talent. Well, for the conservation management plan, we are actually using a small local firm rather than a large national one in order to do that. The fact that we are having to use and to outsource does not mean that we are not doing so sensibly, carefully, prudently, and with the best interests of our residents at heart. One of the other things that was raised was the use of automatic number plate recognition for our car parks. Yep, that will be, it sounds like a nice idea. It has been looked at. It actually wouldn't be practical. It would only work in a couple of car parks. It won't work in all the smaller ones. So it would mean introducing a third system on top of Ringo and Cash, which would be even more complicated, and it would cost a lot of money. And we already do have a Ringo system that is entirely flexible in the way that we've spoken of, pay as you go. You can effectively do that with Ringo. And one of the other things that was spoken about was diverting money from the refurb project to put in this program. Well, unfortunately, we've got car parks that have dire need of attention, that have health and safety needs due to years of underinvestment under that previous administration, and we have to rectify that and invest in them. So I'm afraid that we need to put the money where it's needed in order to make sure that our assets are safe and are in good state for our residents. And I should also just say as well that Ringo is going to be cheaper for an hour's parking this coming year, which is fantastic. So nearly 50% of our residents will be paying less for an hour's parking. That's in the face of all of these, the cost of living rises that are facing everyone across the world, really, but certainly locally. On the permits, I think, Councillor Friend...
Could you draw to a conclusion, please?
Is that really 3 minutes already? Oh, well, I just better say that what I'm really pleased about, though, is we are levelling up in the sense of reducing permit costs for all our residents who have no choice by around £300 a year. That's for around 80% of car park permit users. So doing that with our new flexible permits, I think, is the best thing we can do to support them on that front.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Hawksworth on the budget as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, as you'll appreciate, I'm generally opposed to that. I just wanted to point out we've not had any discussion about the issue of members' allowances, and which we propose perhaps there should be a zero increase on. And I just ask that when we come to that item to vote, that actually is taken separately for a separate vote. And because I'm sure our residents would appreciate it in this present circumstance, at least if members decided to go for 0% this next year. Thank you.
Thank you. For such a motion, which I'll take once I've taken all the speakers, I believe that I'd need at least the support of a quarter of members present, but we'll vote on that as a proposal in terms of the voting at the end. Thank you very much. The next speaker I have here is Councillor James Friend, just so that members know, followed by Councillor James Chambers, and then Councillor Helen Clack, and then the leader, Councillor Stephen Cooksey. Councillor Paul Kennedy,
on a point
you've
of order,
already
Mr.
spoken.
Chairman, Councillor Friend's already spoken in the budget debate. He could speak on the amendment, but he can't speak again on the budget.
Is it a point of order?
It is, Chairman, yes, that's what I've been trying to say. I just wanted to clarify, as Chairman of the Standing Budget Panel, a confusion that has come up in the debate tonight as to why particular items weren't discussed at the Standing Budget Panel. Just to remind all members that the Standing Budget Panel is about process. It is not about the content. So that is why suggestions that are coming forward tonight, and it's been referred to by several people in several points, don't get covered in the Standing Budget Panel. They look at the process, and that's clearly how the terms of reference are set out. I hope that's helpful for members to remember.
Thank you. So, Councillor Helen Clack, then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm offended by the Lib Dems' high-handed criticism of my morals tonight. I feel that the debate has sunk to a really sad level. But I'm going to add to it by saying that the Lib Dems' cloud-based budget, with their high pie-in-the-sky proposals, are compared to our Conservative leaders' down-to-earth and bare truths proposals in response, the residents will choose, and they will choose us.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor James Chambers, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, similar theme really to Helen. It's gone on a bit now, but I'd just like to give Chris the opportunity if he'd like to retract his comments.
Sorry, could I just ask you to pause? Councillor Paul Kennedy, is it a point of order? Because you have spoken.
Yes, I believe Councillor Chambers has already spoken.
I think he spoke on the amendment. No?
This is a point of order, Chair.
Oh, is it?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, very briefly then.
Sorry, no, it's moved on a bit from the conversation, but I just wondered if Councillor Coughlin would like to retract his comment regarding the arrogance of the Conservatives in the Audit Committee. It's a baseless comment, and I don't think it was needed in this debate.
Mr. Chairman, I was referring to the arrogance of the Conservatives here tonight, not in the Audit Committee.
I think even so, that's not, it's not a way we should be conducting ourselves when the public can view this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we do try and keep a degree of decorum.
Chairman, can I ask
Leader?
you that when a member asks to speak under a point of order, that he quotes the standing order that he's dealing with?
Thank you. If that applies to all members. Councillor Margaret Cooksey, is this a point of order, in which case...
It is, Mr Chairman. 25B.
Thank you.
I believe that there was a comment made earlier by a member and another member asked for it to be retracted. That didn't happen. Now we're in this situation again, and I'm anticipating that you're not going to insist that this one is retracted when you didn't do so on the first occasion. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you. I was going to deal with the retractions as we sum up, but thank you for reminding me of that. Thank you. Councillor Patricia Wiltshire, you put your hand up. Is it a standing order item?
I'm not sure what it is. I just, I'm very dismayed at the tenor of this meeting and the irrelevant comments made and highly political comments made that had no bearing on this budget whatsoever by Mr McLaughlin.
Thank you. Right, can I ask Councillor Stephen Cooksey to please now address this as the mover of the motion. After he's spoken, then I'll say some words, and then I will ask Councillor Bridget Kendrick as the actual mover to sum up the debate. So, Leader, I believe you have, do you still have your 5 minutes? Because the original motion was, I timed it at just under 10. So, does the Leader not benefit from the 5? Right. Okay. I'm advised I have to apply the 3-minute rule because in moving the motion, that was, I'm trying to be too kind, was the official word. So three minutes for you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best as ever to stick to the rules. Can I, first of all, Chairman, just add my thanks as Leader to all the members of staff and particularly to Cabinet members, particularly to Councillor Kendrick for the huge amount of work that they've actually put in to producing this budget. It's been a 6-month project and one that had we not put that work in and that effort in would not have actually resulted in the sort of budget that we have tonight, which saves us £800,000 without affecting services and with allowing us to develop innovation and to develop our policies and programmes. It's been a huge effort, and it's one that I think everyone should appreciate. Chairman, I'm a bit disappointed, in fact, at the way that this debate has gone. And I'm trying to hark back to some of the comments that Councillor Friend made, what seems some hours ago, and I think that is quite important because he set the tone for the opposition's comments. I think I also want to say, and I want to emphasise something that's been said on a number of occasions, that Mole Valley does receive less funding than any other principal authority in the country. And I'm disappointed, Chairman, that our MPs haven't taken that up and haven't dealt with it and haven't tried to support us to receive more funding. I think that's something that they should take up and something that they should try to develop on our behalf. Chairman, I was a little bit taken aback because the Leader of the Opposition indicated that he had lots of ideas and lots of suggestions. Yet they came forward with a series of unprepared, uncosted suggestions, which this really isn't the time to produce them. We've had 2 months of debate so far as this budget's concerned, and not a single positive suggestion has come forward from the opposition through scrutiny, through cabinet, through all the opportunities that they've had. And that's why I find very interesting that our MP, that Sir Paul Beresford, said in his latest diatribe that he applauded the helpful input of local Conservative councillors to this debate. And I'm wondering where that is, Chairman. I really haven't seen it. Let me just select a couple of points which are important.
If you could please be brief.
And I'll do that very quickly. First of all, I think this consultant process, we've always, when we were in opposition, we complained about consultants, Chairman. But what the Conservatives didn't do then is what they're actually saying they want to do now. They didn't bring volunteers in. They spent more and more of our resources on consultants for actually the very same reason that we're spending money on consultants. And I've got to say that the County Council spends huge amounts of money, Conservative-controlled County Council spends huge amounts of money on consultants, but there's no criticism there. And I think that is a real example, Chairman, of total unhelpfulness on the part of the opposition. And I think that it's very important that residents should recognise that. If you're going to criticise positively and give us something that we can actually put our teeth into and develop. Don't just put forward nonsensical ideas.
Thank you very much, and I was generous in timing. Thank you. Yes, so before I ask Councillor Bridget Kendrick to sum up, tonight has been a heated debate, and you know, I, like you, am used to the cut and thrust of statements and debating. I have been disappointed that sometimes inappropriate words, I would say, for a full council meeting have been used. And I'd just like the members who have offended other members to reflect on that. And if they are, I wouldn't say brave enough, but if they are kind enough to apologise for any upset that they've caused, I would be much happier. Councillor Moyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe I was personally accused of saying anything to offend anybody, but if I did so unintentionally, and I'm more than happy to apologise for any unintentional comment anybody has taken personally.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Councillor Brooks.
Equally, I would make the same comment as Councillor Moyes. I didn't mean to intend to upset anybody. I hope I presented the facts and my views quite strongly. I apologise if I have offended anybody.
Thank you. I'm sure we are grateful for that. Councillor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comments around the arrogance were because I was upset by the comments about the supposed ignorance of the Liberal Democrats about financial indicators, and if I've upset anybody around beyond being upset about that, I apologise.
Thank you. And Councillor Preedy.
Yes, I would also like to echo the feelings that I know some of the feelings did get fairly strong, and I may have criticised some people, and if I did and did that unreasonably, then I apologise for that.
I appreciate that as well. Thank you. One of the great things when I first joined this council was how cooperative we all were together, working together. Having previously been on Kingston Council, was very much daggers drawn between the groups, and I hope that my successor will inherit a council that is as friendly towards each other as we have traditionally been. So thank you very much, colleagues. Councillor Bridget Kendrick, could you please sum up this debate? Thank you.
How long have I got, Chair?
You have 3 minutes as well.
I'll do my best, and thank you for doing that before. I wasn't quite sure how I would sum that up. I mean, the budget speech, as Councillor Brooks helpfully said herself, is not normally as political as that, but from mentioning Councillor Moss' financial, political leaflets and things like that, it seems to have gone that way. But we are where we are, and it's across both parties, so let's move on in the spirit of these things. I'm going to try and answer a few questions, which is why I'm worried about the 3 minutes. In terms of Councillor James Chambers, I'm actually very happy to prepare an update as maybe perhaps a cabinet report or one of original reports. We can take that offline and how we do that. I certainly did that during COVID, so I see no harm and no reason not to be open and transparent. In terms of Councillor Sarah Chambers, it's the cost of COVID in economic terms. It's people not parking, so there's less parking revenue. People not going to leisure centres. People not going to Dorking halls and rents not being paid. It affects the economics. So there's an economic impact of COVID, not just medical, and of course an impact on life. In terms of Councillor Keeley's questions on Dial-A-Ride and some various comments I heard about playground maintenance, they are all in the budget, just not in separate budget lines, but such as the playground is covered by minor works. Archives, it's very reminiscent of David Cameron's Big Society, and we all know how well that turned out. Yes, interesting. I mean, we certainly would like to encourage volunteering, etc., but getting them to do paid work and certainly some confidential things, probably not. Councillor Brooks, we haven't agreed 3 million of borrowing, but we have prudently budgeted for paying the associated capital finance costs in the case we do. I don't want to set off any alarms there. I'm sure we are all on the same page. In terms of shared services, the leader is part of a cross-county group, and this is actually moving. I hope we will be able to bring this forward, but you can't go into partnerships that other people don't want to. In terms of members' allowance, I recommend we do stick with what is in these proposals. As we can't all assume that every single member here is paid the same as a consultant in Councillor Moyes' calculations. And actually, as the independent review, it was acknowledged that this was an important part and offering of being a member. And I don't think we should go against the independent review and potentially bump up a huge rise in future years, which will become even more political. But generally, in summing up, I think, I do heartily recommend this. I do think some of the comments I heard show, I'm going to be a bit Councillor Draper here and give a scorecard. I'm going to give a D from the opposition because actually, D for distancing. Distancing from the government and their policies. I think you should watch the Andy Burnham video, but it's distancing from the fact we are very much underfunded by the government and the monies we create locally in our economy do not serve this community. And then there's a D for, I don't know, distracting. It's not reminiscent of Boris's bridge, but the parking schemes you recommended would certainly take more than 1 year, more than 1 million capital. And yes, happy to look at them, but it's all distraction at the end of the day, the playbook. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hawksworth requested a separate vote on item 6, which is item 7 on the proposals, which is about members' allowances. I did say that I'd take a vote on that being as an option. Could I see all those members who would like a separate vote for item number 7 about members' allowances to please show? So we need... Okay. Sorry, can everybody show? So we have 11. Thank you. So there will be a separate vote on that. Otherwise, we're going to take items 1 through to 6 on one vote. And again, in accordance with Standing Order Sorry, Councillor Moyes, did you have... No, thank you very much. So we do need to take a named vote on this because it relates to the budget. So could items 1 through to 6 as one block vote and then item 7 as a separate block vote, all right? Thank you.
So again, Chairman, if members could indicate if they're for, against or they wish to abstain. Roger Adams.
For.
Tim Ashton.
Against.
Lynn Brooks.
Against.
Simon Budd.
Against.
Leslie Bushnell. Helen Clack.
Against.
James Chambers.
Against.
Sarah Chambers.
Against.
Chris Coughlin.
For.
Margaret Cooksey.
For.
Stephen Cooksey.
For.
Mary Cooper.
Against.
Elizabeth Daly.
For.
David Draper.
For.
James Friend.
Against.
Nancy Goodacre.
For.
Raj Hack.
For.
David Harper.
Abstain.
David Hawksworth.
Against.
Rosemary Hobbs.
For.
Mary Huggins.
Against.
Chris Hunt.
Against.
Tracy Keeley.
Against.
Bridget Kendrick.
For.
Paul Kennedy.
For.
Claire Malcolmson.
For.
Simon Moss.
Against.
Richard Moyes.
Against.
Emma Norman.
For.
Paul Potter.
For.
David Preedy.
For.
Alan Riley.
Against.
Elsie Rosam. Caroline Salmon.
For.
Kira Vivian Robinson.
For.
Hazel Watson.
For.
Patricia Wiltshire.
Abstain.
Clayton Wellman.
For.
Nick Wright.
For.
And Charles Yarwood.
Against.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Chairman, that's 22 for, 16 against and 2 abstentions. So those are carried.
Thank you. So those items are all carried. Thank you, Council. And then separately, we're voting now on that members' allowances be increased in line with the local pay award for staff as recommended by the Independent Remuneration Panel. So again, a named vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roger Adams.
For.
Tim Ashton.
Abstain.
Lynn Brooks.
Against.
Simon Budd.
Abstain.
Leslie Bushnell. Helen Clack.
Against.
James Chambers.
Against.
Sarah Chambers.
Against.
Chris Coughlin.
For.
Margaret Cooksey. 4. Stephen Cooksey.
For.
Mary Cooper.
Against.
Elizabeth Daly.
4.
David Draper.
For.
James Friend.
Abstain.
Nancy Goodacre.
For.
Raj Hack.
Abstain.
David Harper.
Abstain.
David Hawksworth.
Against.
Rosemary Hobbs.
4.
Mary Huggins.
Abstain.
Chris Hunt.
Against.
Tracy Keeley.
Against.
Bridget Kendrick.
4.
Paul Kennedy.
For.
Claire Malcolmson.
4.
Simon Moss.
Against.
Richard Moyes.
Against.
Emma Norman. Paul Potter.
For.
David Preedy.
For.
Alan Riley.
Abstain.
Elsie Rosam. Caroline Salmon.
For.
Kira Vivian Robinson.
4.
Hazel Watson.
4.
Patricia Wiltshire.
Abstain.
Clayton Wellman.
For.
Nick Wright. I'm so sorry, Chairman, I didn't hear that.
Abstain.
Thank you. And Charles Yarwood.
Abstain.
Thank you. So that's 24, Chairman, 10 against and 10 abstentions.
Thank you very much, and thank you, members. So I believe that...
Sorry, point of order. Can you just repeat those numbers? Because I'm not sure that added up.
20 in
24,
favour.
Chairman, 10 against and 10 abstentions.
So I believe that means that the motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Council. Can I just draw everyone's attention to the time, because it's nearly 9:30. I believe that we should try to get through our agenda before 10:30. 10 o'clock. Right, so item number 8, which is on page C249. This is a report where members are asked to consider the report that's actually set out on pages 249 to 65, and decide whether they wish to accept the recommendations set out actually on page 4 of your main agenda papers. Councillor Kennedy, could I please ask you to introduce the item and propose the recommendations?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm introducing the annual pay policy statement and gender pay gap report to Council for reporting under the Localism Act and the Equality Act, respectively. It's important to note that there are key differences between the figures reported under each of the different legislative requirements. This links to the broader purpose of the legislation, which is explained in the report. This pay policy statement forms part of a range of pay policies to promote equality in pay practices. The gender pay gap information provides additional information, and together these documents assist in ensuring that the Council is promoting transparency and accountability with regards to the approach to setting pay. The pay policy statement reports in particular on the proportion of earnings from those at the top of the organisation to the lowest paid employee. The figures this year are very similar to previous years and well within the recommended maximum set by the Hutton Principles. Turning to the gender pay gap, which the Council are under duty to note, although the figures reported are higher than last year, the report notes that many organisations are reporting a wider gap compared to earlier years, and that comparisons with prior years are to be treated with caution due to turbulence resulting from the pandemic. In terms of comparisons with other organisations, the vast majority of organisations have a gender pay gap. There are complex societal root causes for these. The report also provides an indication of the type of workforce factors that can influence the nature and degree of the gender pay gap. This explanation will accompany the reporting of the gap in line with advice to all reporting organisations to give a narrative to provide wider context. The report also refers to an increasing expectation on employers to offer flexibility to accommodate different working patterns. Whilst this is often regarded as a way to close the gender pay gap, it particularly benefits staff with caring responsibilities, who can be any gender. Flexibility is a key mechanism to improve staff recruitment and retention. A hybrid working pilot has therefore been in place to assist with this so far as possible, bearing in mind a range of factors including the type of work and overall business need.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder? I see the leader. Would you like to speak?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Any member wish to speak to this item? I see none. Councillor Kennedy, I should ask you to sum up the debate, but is there anything you wish to add?
No, I have no additional comments. I just move.
Thank you. Is Council accepting the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. I'll take that as all agreed. Thank you very much. Item number 9. This is where we have the extra item. You should have an addendum paper on your table. So this further recommendation before us this evening, we have one from the Standards Committee held on the 14th of February 2022, and the report considered by the committee is appended to this agenda, main papers, pages 267 through to 297. And as I said, I draw members' attention to the supporting information within the addendum, which relates to the adoption of the Local Government Association New Model Code of Conduct. The recommendations are set out on page 1 of the addendum. Councillor Patricia Wiltshire, could I please ask you to introduce this item and propose the recommendations?
Thank you, Chairman. This is the recommendations of the Extraordinary Standards Committee meeting held on the 14th of February 2022. In September last year, the Standards Committee met as a working group to consider the Local Government Association new Model Code of Conduct for Councillors. In terms of key changes, the proposed new Model Code includes strengthened content in relation to bullying and harassment and equalities and diversity. The new code also proposes an increase in the estimated value of gifts and hospitality received by councillors from the current £25 to £50, as well as an additional requirement to declare any gifts and hospitality which have been offered and declined. Finally, members will have noted the proposed revisions to the registration of interest for councillors. There are now 3 distinct categories. A, disclosable pecuniary interests. We are familiar with these, for example, employment, land contracts, and so on. B, other registrable interests, for example, membership of the National Trust. And C, non-registrable interests, for example, determining a planning application of a family member. Members of the Standards Committee, including our 2 parish representatives, Mrs Debbie Jones and Mr Stuart McLachlan, met on the 14th of February, and at our meeting we formally agreed to recommend to Council that the new Model Code of Conduct for Councillors be adopted. Please note, Chairman, there is a small amendment to the first recommendation as detailed in the addendum circulated to all members. The committee agreed that if a new code is adopted, this should take effect from the new municipal year in May, thereby enabling necessary training and guidance to be provided to all councillors. I would also draw members' attention to other points referred to in the addendum, particularly the additional guidance provided by the Local Government Association, which is well worth a read. And I must say it is worth a read, and I do recommend everybody reads it in detail and carefully, because it will answer all your questions. I thank colleagues on the Standards Committee for their contributions and consideration of the new Councillor Code of Conduct, and I now formally propose the recommendations to Council.
Thank you, Councillor. For this item, you don't need a seconder. Are there any members wish to speak? Leader, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I very much support the adoption of the new Code of Conduct based on the LGA recommendations. I'm very familiar with the content since I served on a committee at County Council a couple of years ago that introduced a very similar revised code based on the same recommendations. Chairman, I think that it is important for all members to embrace the 7 principles on which the code is based: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty and leadership, and to ensure that the consequential requirements, based, for example, on respect for all members and never bringing the Council into disrepute, are fully complied with. I'm therefore going to propose a recorded vote so that all members can demonstrate a personal commitment to accepting the code and observing its requirements.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote just before we vote on the item generally. Any other member wish to speak? If not, Councillor Wiltshire, would you like to just sum up, and then I'll put Councillor Cooksey's
Yes, thank
suggestion
you.
to the vote.
The new code is more comprehensive than the old code and a little easier to understand because it is explained more fully. One in particular, I would strengthen the recommendation of mutual respect. I think it's terribly important that we respect each other, both in the written word and in the spoken word, and particularly in meetings. And I feel that I saw tonight some examples of disrespect, and I feel that we should be very aware of that. So if there's no more debate, I welcome the adoption of the new code, and I look forward to training for members, which is likely to be after the May elections.
Thank you, Councillor. So, could I see all those in favour of having a named vote on this item? I think that's agreed. Ms Davies, would you mind, have you enough paper to record everything? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So if councillors could indicate for, against or abstention. Roger Adams.
For.
Tim Ashton.
For.
Lynn Brooks.
For.
Simon Budd.
For.
Leslie Bushnell.
For.
Helen Clack.
For.
James Chambers.
For.
Sarah Chambers.
For.
Chris Coughlin.
For.
Margaret Cooksey.
For.
Stephen Cooksey.
For.
Mary Cooper. For. Elizabeth Daly. David Draper.
For.
James Friend.
For.
Nancy Goodacre.
For.
Raj Hack.
For.
David Harper.
For.
David Hawksworth.
For.
Rosemary Hobbs.
For.
Mary Huggins.
For.
Chris Hunt.
For.
Tracy Keeley.
For.
Bridget Kendrick.
For.
Paul Kennedy.
For.
Claire Malcolmson.
For.
Simon Moss.
For.
Richard Moyes.
For.
Emma Norman.
For.
Paul Potter.
For.
David Breedy.
For.
Alan Riley. Elsie Rowsome. Caroline Salmon.
For.
Kira Vivian Robinson.
For.
Hazel Watson.
4.
Patricia Wiltshire.
4.
Clayton Wellman.
4.
Nick Wright.
4.
Charles Yarwood.
4.
That's 44, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and thank you, members. So this is where we now add in the urgent item, please. Councillors, we are considering recommendations from committees, and this one further item is from the Audit Committee, which was a meeting held on the 27th of January, which needs to be taken urgently this evening. I consider it timely to adjust the agenda to accommodate this item into our proceedings now. So we need to make a decision on this, you see, before the 11th of March. The item concerns the decision to opt into the national scheme for auditor appointments, which is managed by Public Sector Audit Appointments. A copy of the report was emailed to all councillors this afternoon, with hard copies provided this evening, and the recommendation is set out on page 1. So have all members had enough time to either read the email version or read the paper version? Does any member wish to have a couple of minutes to look through the papers? Councillor Harper, yes?
I don't mean to be the only person and hold up the whole meeting, though. If it's only me, then I don't think I'll have any difference.
You might be the only one brave enough to put your hand up, Councillor Harper.
I haven't had time to see it at
See,
all.
it's a snowball. It's a snowball. Are there other members who would usefully use 2 minutes? I think that would be fair because it's not just a single sheet of paper. So I'll set my timer, and whilst doing so, perhaps people can think up what they're going to say so that they can be as succinct as possible either on this item or on the next. Thank you. Yes. 30 seconds to go. Feel like a exam invigilator in the hall. Okay, pens down. Councillor Lynn Brooks, could I please ask you to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. This report was considered at the Audit Committee on the 27th of January and sets out proposals for appointing the Council as external auditor for the accounts for the 5-year period from 23 to 24. The current auditor appointment arrangements cover the period up to and include the audit of 22-23 accounts. Mole Valley District Council opted into the appointing personal national audit appointment arrangement established by the Public Sector Audit Appointments for the period covering the accounts from 2018-19 to 22-23. This procurement is now going out for the next accounting period, covering the audits from 23-24 to 27-28. Mole Valley District Council must, by the 11th of March 22, as all other government bodies, needs to make an important decision about this external audit arrangement to go forward. We have options to arrange our own procurement and make the appointment ourselves or in conjunction with other bodies. Or we can join and take advantage of this national collective scheme administered by the PSAA. Obviously, if the Council wishes to take advantage of the national audit appointment arrangements, it is required under the local audit regulations to make this decision at full Council. In the view of the Section 151 officer, there is little, if anything, to be gained by Mole Valley running its own audit procurement process in relation to either quality or price, while the costs and risks would be considerable. It is understood that other councils in Surrey are minded to opt into the national scheme, and therefore the Audit Committee recommends to Council that Mole Valley District Council accepts the invitation to opt into the sector-led option for the appointment of external auditors for the next 5 financial years from the 1st of April 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much for introducing that. Again, Councillor Brooks doesn't need a seconder for this item. Do any members wish to speak? I see none. Councillor Brooks, was there anything you needed to add? Is this agreed? Agreed then. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you. Let's move now then, please, to item number 10, which is the Building Energy Management Systems, which I think Councillor Preedy referred to earlier in the budget debate, if I'm right, for Pickbrook Council offices and the Dorking halls. Members are asked to consider the report that's set out from page 299 to 302 in your main papers and decide whether you wish to accept the recommendation that's actually set out on page 4 of the agenda. So Councillor Ciara Vivian Robinson, could I please ask you to introduce this item and to propose the recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this is a very straightforward recommendation. We're requesting the release of a maximum of £70,000 from the Minor Works Capital Programme. This is not additional funding, in other words, to replace the BMS system, which is the heating and ventilation system at both Pickbrook offices and Dorking halls. That system controls the heating, ventilation and cooling and is a system which has been in place for about 20 years, has been upgraded over the years, most recently when the air source heat pumps were put in place. But it is now the case that the current supplier or the current software that we use has been withdrawn from sale and is no longer supported by the supplier. As the report sets out, if the system were to fail, it would be likely that there would be at least a 4-week gap before it was possible to install a new system. And so in order to avoid the risk of that happening and the considerable inconvenience to residents and users of the buildings, the officers wish to preempt those issues by installing this new software at this point. The costs will include a full health check, an upgrade to the outstations, replacing the obsolete software and the installation and training for staff. And so therefore we ask for the recommendation that approval is given for a maximum of £70,000 to be allocated from the Minor Works Capital Programme for 21-22 for the replacement of the BMS systems at Pickbrook offices and Dorking halls. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask if there's any members wish to add or comment on this item, could I just ask, and perhaps you could deal with it, summing up, when was the air source heat pump put in?
I believe it was just this year, as far as I'm aware. I think Councillor Malcolmson will be able to confirm, but it was this year.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak to this item? Councillor Richard Moyes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After some of the conversations this evening, I would just like to declare that I fully understand the need for such a system. However, I'm a little concerned to vote on something where the phrase is a maximum of 70,000, and once again, it might only be 70,000 and it might be coming from a minor works capital, but to many of our residents may be listening or hearing about this evening, £70,000 is not a minor figure. So I would like to have a greater understanding of, is it £5,000 or is it £69,500? My second question is, how many times has the current system failed when there was a backup service, and how quickly was it brought back up to speed so we could use it? And my third question, most importantly at all, if the trend 963 was withdrawn in 2019, Why is this only being brought to our attention today? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was remiss. We do need a seconder for this proposal. Is anybody prepared to second? Councillor David Preedy, I saw your hand first. Thank you very much. Councillor Preedy, did you want to speak, or is it?
Yeah, I'll just say a few words. I noticed looking in the papers here that they say the system is over 20 years old. This strongly suspects to me that it was introduced as a result of the Y2K changes, which were about 21 years ago. And as such, it's clearly a long-lasting system. And these systems do need replacing. They do need bringing up to date. I was personally involved in a lot of the Y2K stuff because at the time I worked for Microsoft. It brings back many memories. It is maligned as a wasted effort. In fact, it was a remarkably good risk prevention analysis, and it led to the upgrades of lots of systems. And I support this having to be done. 20 years is a long time for an IT system, and you need to replace them. And I do note that there are costs itemised in paragraph 3.3, which may help Councillor Moyes if he hasn't had a chance to look at them yet.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor James Chambers, thank you.
One of my questions has already been asked, but another question I had, what was the cost of the heat pump last year? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor David Harper, thank you.
Will the chamber be warm enough to sit in without a coat on?
That has brought a warmth to us all. If not, I see no other members. Councillor Kiera Vivian Robinson, could you kindly sum up the debate, and if you can answer any of those questions, that would be appreciated as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will do my best. As Councillor Preedy mentioned, paragraph 3.3, it sets out the estimates for Pitbrook, which is estimated at costing $32,835, and Dorking Hall's estimated at costing $26,467 plus a 10% contingency and an allowance for replacement laptops. So I hope that covers that question. I'm afraid I don't have details of how often or if at all, in fact, the system has failed. That's something I don't know, but I will certainly ask. In terms of why it hasn't been replaced to date, my understanding is that the support for although they stopped selling it in 2019, my understanding is that the support for the software has only recently ceased because of the new Windows update, and that's why it's become critical at this point. And I'm afraid I would have to ask Councillor Malcolmson off the top of my head as the best person to answer as to how much the heat pump installation cost. I suppose there may be some confusion here. So the officers did seek funding to install this upgrade at the same time as the air source heat pumps were installed, because obviously that would have been better to do it at the same time. But unfortunately, the funding for it was not provided with the grant. Perhaps Councillor Malcolmson could answer the question on the heat pump.
I think it would be useful to the council if you knew the price.
Well, we received a grant from the government, and it was just under $500,000 to put the heat pump in Pitbrook and in Dorking Halls.
Thank you.
Heat pumps and LED lights.
Thank you very much. Was there anything that you wish to add, Councillor Vivian Robinson?
Nothing else other than to move the recommendation, please.
Thank you very much. Can I see all those members in favour of the recommendation to please show? Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So that motion is, recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. We're now looking, therefore, please, at item number 11, which are reports on decisions taken under special urgency arrangements. These decisions have all obviously been reported previously on the council's website, so there's no sort of secrecy in terms of that, but this is just a report to formally bring them before full council to show recent decisions that have been taken. just referring to my text. The decisions were taken by the Chief Executive in a consultation with the Leader of the Council, the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Economy and the Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee. So those are just for us to note, I believe. Thank you very much. Item number 12 is the Leader's Statement. So Leader, could you please update us on what you wish to, and you have 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As we are all aware, the end of last week brought disruption across the district with flying debris, fallen trees and blocked roads. Work continues to remove council-owned trees, repair any damage to our properties and clean up debris. Unfortunately, many residents across the district were also without power and some without water. In such situations, the council has a key role in working with partners to support our communities, and I know you will want to join me in thanking both our own staff and our partners for their hard work over the weekend to identify vulnerable people and ensure that they were safe while the utility companies worked to restore power and water. I'd also like to thank those across the Mole Valley community who yet again went above and beyond to help. We saw many examples of residents checking in on neighbours to make sure that they were safe. A number collected bottled water for those who couldn't access the central water stations, and others set up a drop-in centre in their village to ensure that those without power had somewhere warm to go. Chairman, when we met in December, the Omicron variant was beginning to spread within our community, and we were uncertain regarding the impact that this would have. Thankfully, although the number of cases rose to higher levels than during any other wave, the number of residents becoming seriously ill and requiring hospital treatment, while increasing, didn't rise in the same way. I wanted to thank everyone who worked or volunteered throughout December and in the early part of this year to ensure that the booster programme could be rolled out effectively. I know that many gave up their Christmas plans in order to ensure that we could all access these important vaccinations. I'm pleased to be able to confirm that over 70% of all adults in Mole Valley have now received their booster, and that's quite a remarkable achievement. Yesterday, we heard the Prime Minister announce a number of changes to the measures originally introduced to help control the spread of COVID. Our teams will be reviewing the changes and any guidance published, and I want to reassure you that we will work with partners to do everything we can to inform our residents, our businesses and our communities about the changes and what they mean for them. While there has been much necessary focus on the budget and on the local plan in recent weeks, I want to take this opportunity to update you on some other important areas of work. You'll be aware that our benefits team has been working under considerable pressure throughout the pandemic to support our communities. Over recent weeks, the team has been working closely with our external auditors to check the £17.24 million of payments made during 2020-2021. I'm really pleased to be able to report that after all the required checks were carried out, only one minor error amounting to a total of 29 pence was found. I'm sure that you will want to join me in thanking the team for all their hard work, including ensuring that payments were made to those who needed to isolate because of COVID. I also wanted to congratulate our Mole Valley Life team, working with Surrey County Council, have been awarded an IESC Certificate of Excellence in recognition of their joint work we're doing on the Enabling You with Technology scheme. I'd encourage you to look at the Mole Valley Life website, where you can read about the very wide range of services now available to residents. And that's not the only award received since we last met. Our multi-agency intergeneration connections project was selected as one of 3 winners of the Best Arts Project 2022 in the National Hearts for Arts Award. This initiative was a multi-purpose project between Mole Valley District Council, Surrey County Council and NHS Surrey Heartlands, working alongside GP surgery-based prescribers, primary care networks, a local primary school, and a team of young musicians. The project utilised music and singing to enable connections between local care home residents and Year 6 primary school students in order to remedy the effects of the pandemic on both age groups. Indeed, it was so successful that there will be 60 further projects rolled out across the whole of Surrey Downs. What started as a small idea to help those in our district has evolved into a county-wide lasting legacy of music and social connection for some of our most isolated members in our communities. And finally, I know many of you were concerned to learn of untreated sewage releases into rivers across the country, especially into the River Mole. I wanted to confirm that I've written to the Environmental Agency and Thames Water to clarify matters and to understand what action is being taken. And I will continue to press these organisations to communicate with us and with residents about this most concerning issue. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you. We are 4 minutes away from 10 o'clock. The next item on the agenda is reports of Cabinet members, and I believe the first member to address us is Councillor Margaret Cooksey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll leave most of the report for members to read, but I do want to indicate that our new development manager will start with us tomorrow, which is a great relief for the team. I know that Louise Wesson will be welcomed by members, all of whom understand just how difficult and visible the planning service is. As reported at the last meeting, speed of decision-making is not where I or the officers wish it to be. I can advise, as well as a number of short-term measures, officers have brought in the Planning Advisory Service to facilitate training on internal diagnostics and performance improvement. The Planning Advisory Service will also be running our Development Management member training in May, facilitated by member peers focusing on making sound decisions. This is provided by government funding to the Advisory Service, so there is no cost to Mole Valley. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for your brevity. Obviously, we've got your written report as well. Councillor Caroline Salmon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My report stands as written. Just to add to that, the environmental health says no update of interest, whereas in fact there is an interest on it, in as much as of Thursday they will no longer need to be looking at track and trace, so they will be able to return completely to their roles, and I think they will be quite happy about that. They've been helping out, trying to find people and getting them to isolate on the track and trace side. We have now housed, or are very near to housing, the 2 Afghan families, and we do hope that they'll be very happy in Mole Valley. The homeless team have continued to work miracles with temporary housing for those unintentionally homeless, and to try and find 2 houses for these has been a challenge, but one which they have risen to. I would also back the words of the leader in respect to the Mole Valley Life team, who, together with, I think, some staff from Mole Valley as well, phoned around the vulnerable people to make sure that they were okay in our power cuts and water problems of last week. And it's the sort of thing that we all do naturally to help make lives a little better for all our residents, because the reason that we are councillors is because we care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Clayton-Wellman.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose my first announcement, which can be made now, is that we've got a brilliant new parking permit scheme coming in April that's the best and most revolutionary change to the system for a generation, and sets us up for a post-COVID world of flexible working and living and delivering the very best value possible to our residents, meaning that, as I mentioned in the budget debate, around 80% of our parking permit users will save around about £300 a year, so that's fantastic. And despite having to raise the base rate for the parking pay and display charge, which will be coming in August or September, it will be cheaper for anyone using Ringo for an hour's parking, which is almost half of our car park users. So I think those are two things to be very proud of. On community safety, the JET team is putting in an excellent performance still, with over 96% of cases being responded to within 2 days, and I'm very glad that we've also made sure that we're supporting that team and bring it forward as a priority this year. And I didn't get onto the yellow lines either by my speech, but we've got 2 new CEOs that we've just hired, who have got out-of-hours contracts, so that's good news as well on that front. I must highlight the Hospitality Skills Buffet, which is a campaign and a set of courses that we have put together in conjunction with Horsham District Council and Crawley College. And these courses will help hospitality businesses and those seeking a career in the industry. They range from one-day courses for upskilling or for those seeking careers in hospitality in things like barista training, cocktail making, silver service, and so on. But there's also courses for new business owners and other existing businesses, regulatory courses covering things such as licensing, environmental health, and so on. They're all fully funded, but those who are interested must register their interest by 15th March on the Crawley College website. If you put in Hospitality Skills Buffet into Google, you will find it. The Employment and Skills Hub, the MV Hub, is now funded for a further year, which is also fantastic news. And we've got lots of plans and loads of things I wanted to also go over, but didn't have time for in my 3 minutes. But there's more of that to come. So that's great news for those in our district that need that kind of support. Finally, I will just mention there's a wide range of financial and other business support available to all our businesses. And that's summarized in our Spotlight newsletter. But for any businesses out there or anyone who's interested, please do sign up to that newsletter on our website or visit the business pages of the Mole Valley website. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. So are you now the Cabinet Member for Buffet?
Well, you could say that, but a buffet of all sorts of wonderful things, I hope.
Yes, yeah. It does look very good work, and the Skills Hub as well. I've noted their successes in outreach work to extend beyond the sort of physical constraints of the building, aren't they? They're working with the local communities.
Yeah, they are, and I think that's, I mean, we've talked a bit about tonight about the places in our community that face deprivation, and we do have outreach from that service around the Kingston Road area and on Goodwins, and they have been on Bookham, where there has been need as well. So yeah, we're reaching out as far as possible into those communities to help people into employment and into skills, and yeah, we're doing our best to support our residents.
Thank you, Councillor. And I've noted that other Cabinet members' reports are in the papers that we can all take home and read at leisure. So I hope you didn't mind that little interaction I had there, but we'd already gone beyond 10 o'clock. In accordance with Standing Order 14, the Council meeting should end at 10, unless any member wishes to extend it. Otherwise, the business gets carried on to another meeting, I believe. Councillor Claire Malcolmson.
I would like to extend it because I have a very, very important motion to put forward, and so does Councillor Vivian Robinson. Please.
Do you have a seconder? Yes, you do.
I'll do it quickly.
So we need, it's a simple majority, isn't it? So could I see all those members in favour of continuing tonight's meeting to please show? We had 19 members show, so we don't have a majority. So the agenda items will therefore...
Excuse me, Chairman. Some of the members have left, so is it a majority of those present or those who started the meeting?
It is it's a majority of the members of the council, so it is 21 out of the 41 in total, I'm advised. Thank you. I've just been advised that the two motions will be referred on to Cabinet. Okay. And then they'll come back to the subsequent council meeting. As you know, there were no councillors' questions submitted, so item 14 doesn't need to get carried over. The meeting would close, but Leader?
Chairman, just to clarify, you said you'd come back to the next council meeting. Next council meeting is the annual meeting. Is that the meeting that it will come back to?
Well, Chairman, motions they'll go to Cabinet and then they would come back to the next ordinary meeting of the council. So I think actually July.
So go to Cabinet, which meets in a few weeks' time.
In March.
In March. Thank you very much, members. And so the meeting ends at 10:08. Thank you.